Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto Wolf Bloodline Chunin exams. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Brooding, Naruto walked into Team 7's training area and took off his jacket, dropping it onto the hard ground. He aggressively began to pound the training post, splinters of wood dislodging themselves from his fist each time he punched the compact piece of wood. His reason why he was there was because after being released from the hospital, Naruto had sought out his sensei in hope of getting trained in order to beat the Hyuga prodigy, Neji, but they were quickly dashed away when Kakashi abruptly told him that he had better things to do than train Naruto. To stop the tears from falling, he spent the rest of his hours in his house, staring at the picture of the leaf insignia, till he thought of the training grounds. A twig snapping and the rustling of leaves pulled Naruto from his own world to that of the living world. The leaves rustled again, Naruto's ears twitching in response, and curiously, he peered into the darkness and saw a barely visible shadow running south. A grim smile drew itself on his face as an idea formed in his mind. If his hunch was correct, he could vent his anger on something else. Grabbing his orange jacket and hastily putting it on, he gave chase, the light blue orb in the night sky casting a pale shadow over the forest. The Suna ninja ran through the dense forest, stopping at a small patch of space to catch his breath due to the fact that his mission was difficult, but he had accomplished it. The case cage had told him to retrieve Konoha's entire layout, and it being located in the Hokage building, the mission's chance of success were slim, but thanks to an unlikely helper, he posed as an Anbu captain. Tricking the Hokage into getting the layout was hard, but he had done it by lying about the village's security measures being increased, and to do that without causing pandemonium, they had to choose the points wisely, therefore the need of the scroll. As he continued to pant, he sensed a faint chakra signal and got up, preparing to make a break for it, but reconsidered his decision when he saw a kid garbed in orange. "Oi!" exclaimed the kid. "Why is a Suna shinobi heading for the south gates with a scroll that has the leaf symbol on it?" The nin smiled as he removed his balaclava, dark brown locks framing his handsome face. "You want the reason, kid? If I tell you, then I am afraid I'll have to kill you," replied the nin. "Oh yeah, I dare you to try it," challenged the kid, his eyes burning with intensity. "Okay kid, you wanna know so bad, fine. No skin off my ass plus I get to kill you," he said, fully turning to Naruto. "The scroll I have here is the entire layout of Konoha, showing weak and strong points of the village. Imagine this falling into enemy hands. Konoha would be in deep shit, wouldn't they? Now I've told. Guess it's time for you to die," finished the nin, and before Naruto could register what was happening, a fist met his jawline, forcing him backwards into the ground. The nin gave a merciless laugh before stalking towards Naruto, picking him up by the neck and shoving his knee into the genin's gut, making him keel forward in pain, but wasn't given a chance to recover and was thrown downwards, his head impacting against the ground and his vision blurred while blood rushed to his head. "See kid, don't get cocky, thinking you can beat someone more stronger, especially when you're nothing but a weakling," said the nin. A smirk stuck on his mon's words echoed inside Naruto's head. "You're nothing but a weakling. Nothing but a weakling. A weakling. Weakling." A wave of indescribable rage washed over him. No one called him a weakling and got away with it. The determined Hokage to be steadily rose, wiping a smear of blood in the corner of his mouth, and he looked the smirking nin in the eye. Pure white hot rage was evident. The same rage and the color of the blonde's eye unnerved the nin greatly, and something about Moon's eerie glow on the kid added more nervousness to his current fear. Naruto felt himself get hot, his skin becoming more agitated, as if wanting to shed itself from him. Fingers and toes began twitching like crazy. A feeling of blood rushing to his head began to cause a deep pounding due to the deep rage that seemed to swell when asked. Are you? Oblivious to the outside world, Naruto's throat vibrated. A low growl sounded came from it as the moonlight gently caressed him. Nails elongated, his hair grew shaggier and longer, the leaf headband no longer able to hold back the hair sprung from him. His drenched clothes fell away as blonde hair grew from every pore of his body, his growing chest tearing apart his black shirt, and the rest of his clothes ended up the same way. The loud crunch and snapping of bones, breaking and reforming was audible. The pelvis began snapping and reshaped itself, making Naruto hunch over. Naruto's muscles reformed too, and soon, Naruto was on all fours covered in a fair blonde coat, His nose lengthened, the skin of his mouth pulled back to form a snout while a row of yellow dagger-like teeth prodded out from the dark pink gums. As the last of his transformation began, the former human's fur turning a blood-red color and two tails sprouted from the creature's butt. Said creature tilted its head up and a loud howl escaped its throat, the howl carried by the translucent full moon. Jiraiya woke up suddenly, his eyes wide in fear at the howl that had traveled across Konoha, waking him up in the process. Seeing as he had slept with his clothes on, he slipped on his wooden sandals and run to the source of the sound. The last time he heard that howl was when Kushina had turned. Shaking off the memory, he furthered his efforts and practically flew from tree to tree. Sarutobi Sasuke gazed at his crystal ball, his face in astonishment and marvel. He had seen his successor's wife transformation, and although she had looked beautiful, Naruto's transformation was much more now. He should have been at home with his wife and his grandkids, his only fear being death, but apparently, that would not happen. Naruto, having unlocked his hidden bloodline, made the old man feel his own age. "I'm too old for this shit." Quote, the creature circled its terrified prey, a trail of saliva hanging from its powerful jaws. The nin thought such a large creature couldn't move fast, but it sped towards him, its jaws ajar, malevolent blue silted eyes affixed on his prey. The nin rolled left but wasn't quick enough to dodge the large paw that seared its way through his shoulder, the body piece dropping to the ground with blood spurting from the detached arm. The nin cried out in pain, a torrent of blood flowed from the fatal wound. At the sight of the blood, the beast lost its self-control, lost in the bloodlust that had increased. It moved toward him slowly, standing on its hind legs, drawing itself to full height. The frightened nin used his legs to kick himself backwards but was stopped by a paw being slammed into his blow crushed his ribcage. A stray damaged bone stabbed the heart internally, abruptly ending his life. Jiraiya heard a scream of pain, followed by a snapping of bones, and fearing for the worst, he accelerated his pace, managing to reach the little section in time to stop the blood-red wolf fox-like thing by calling its name. "Naruto, snap out of it. You know that the power is dangerous, fight it. Fight it?" He relished such power, and as Naruto's jaws sped for the nin's head, he froze on the spot. "No, no, no. I don't want to kill." "Of course you do. That is why you have gained such power." "No. Why SSSSSSSSS." From Jiraiya's vantage point, he could see Naruto bend forward, its claws swiping at his head, and after a few minutes, the creature stopped moving and its thick blood-red fur began turning back to blonde before receding into Naruto's body, his nails and snout retracted, leaving a trembling, nude boy. Jiraiya gave a sigh of relief and gave Naruto a sympathetic glance. Whether the boy was shaking in guilt of having taken someone's life or because of the cold, he didn't know. He walked over to the mutilated corpse, retrieved the scroll from it and used a light fire jutsu, setting it on fire, and the smell of burned flesh wafted into his nose. Taking off his coat and wrapping it around his godson, he gave a final look at the burning tangled mess of bone, brain, blood and flesh before setting off to the Hokage Tower, dreading the explanation to come. Naruto slowly stood up, his muscles hurting and his head spinning. Looking around him, he could see nothing but an endless darkness, and as he inched forward, he felt something tug at his bare ankles. Looking down, he could make out a stream of water running from one end the tunnel he was currently in to the other end. He felt the current of the water was guiding him somewhere, so he allowed himself to be carried down the tunnel of darkness. Walking round 3 or 4 turns, he found himself in front of a large gate. Only sound present, save his breathing, was the dull continuous vibrating of the pipes overhead and around. Drops of water continuously fell into the water, causing tiny ripples in the water. Traveling through the misty water to the gate in wonder, he moved forward slightly, now noticing the small piece of paper holding the main bars of the gate together that itself was embroidered with several seals, and then a massive paw equipped with miniature dagger-like claws shot through the bars of the gate, intent on slicing up the intruder. Naruto stood stock still in fear at the prospect of dying, but let a sigh of relief escape him when the claws missed him, trapping him in between each one. He then jumped in surprise as a twin pair of red slitted eyes appeared within darkness beyond the gate, followed by a row of sharp teeth and very large canines were formed, making out a cruel grin. The teeth that began to part and Naruto closed his eyes, whimpering slightly. I mean, who wouldn't when faced with a mouth the size of a house opening up wide, but opened them up when a deep, rich voice echoed outwards. So, my container finally appears to meet me. The latter's eyes widened in shock. A red haze enveloped the inside of the gate, casting a hue of the same color, revealing the torso and head of a large, auburn-colored fox, which was Naruto now identified as Kyuubi thanks to the 9 massive tails swishing left to right as if bored. "You know, for visiting me for the first time, you could have been a bit presentable," said Kyuubi while eyeing his jailer, who had the decency to blush while covering his jewels with his hands and turning his eyes sideways, avoiding to look at Kyuubi straight in the eye. "So, it seems that though you lost control during your little episode," said Kyuubi, resulting in Naruto's head making a 180-degree turn, his widened in shock. "How?" he asked, his voice slightly fearful. He could remember the way his primal instincts and bloodlust had taken over his mind, turning him into a vicious creature. An amused chuckle rumbled deep within the kitsune's throat, its eyes twinkling oddly, as if Naruto's change had pleased it greatly. "I am bound to you by this infernal piece of paper," he said, his beady black nose rubbed against it. "And whatever you see, feel, smell, hear, taste, etc., I can experience them," he finished, refocusing his eyes onto the human sacrifice shivering from the cold. A question popped up into Naruto's mind, and as he opened his mouth, Kyuubi sensed a barrel of questions waiting to erupt but interrupted Naruto by saying, "Do not ask me question on what happened before, because the man currently carrying you is headed for the old man's office and maybe he can answer both our questions. I shall call you again when needed. Now go," he roared while stabbing his tail into Naruto's seal, his essence fading out of his mindscape. Jiraiya landed gracefully through the open window. His old mentor sat opposite him in his black leather chair. His long smoking pipe casually emitted a column of smoke that drifted and circled the top of his crystal ball that sat comfortably on his desk, switching between images of the village before a white mist swirled around inside. Then the ball glowed slightly before becoming the glass ornament it was usually mistaken for. He leaned back his chair, his aged and wise eyes scanned his surrogate grandson, worry evident in his eyes. He nodded at his old student, who laid the boy down on the couch beside his dark oak desk, and both waited in a pregnant silence, mentally preparing answers for the barrage of questions that would be asked. Naruto woke up an hour later, his mind had rested but his body waiting to catch up. His eyes opened and he recognized the old man's caring, wrinkled face but not the white-haired male behind him. "Gigi, what happened? I feel as if someone hit me on the head with a mallet." He gave a light chuckle and the man behind him had a small smile on his face. "Naruto," said the Hokage. He really hated to tell Naruto about his heritage, but it was inevitable now. "Can you tell me what happened in the forest?" "But, I know you have questions, Naruto, and I will answer them in due patience," replied the Hokage as he left the couch and settled into his very important seat. He pressed the intercom and it crackled as the receptionist's voice asked him what he wanted, to which he responded. 3 bowls of ramen, some tea and biscuits. He could see Naruto jumping in excitement. "Will that be all?" "Yes. For now at least," remembering how a 7-year-old child could devour over 15 bowls. After having the short meal, in which more bowls of ramen were ordered, Naruto explained what and why he was trailing the ninja, and when the Hokage and the now identified Jiraiya heard about how Kakashi dismissed Naruto training, both frowned but were soon shocked when Naruto asked about Kakashi not training him because he believed him to be a demon. Jiraiya was silently fuming and clenching his fists, barely managing to contain his anger, while Sarutobi kept an indifferent face but was mentally ranting about one-eyed bastard. Tears began to seep from the prankster's eyes of one more person hating him, furthermore breaking both ninjas to console Naruto. After Naruto calmed down, he asked them why and the Hokage gulped. Before answering, he added more tobacco to his pipe and inhaled the addictive scent, before opening his eyes, gray and unfocused, peering into his past as he explained the evening's happenings. 25 years ago, Minato Namikaze, student and apprentice to Jiraiya of the Densetsu no Sannin, traveled to the whirlpool. He met a woman called Kushina and both were jonin at that time and were attracted to each, and Minato had to leave so they never saw each other again, till both went to see the Chunin selection, and thereon, they began to know each other, got engaged, and finally, got married. Interrupting him, Naruto asked what this had to do with him, but silenced once more by an irate Sarutobi, enjoying his storytelling time too much to be interrupted. Now, as I was saying before being rudely interrupted, Sarutobi shot Naruto a dark look, who put his hands up innocently. Minato was crowned as my successor and by far, was the best Hokage Konohagakure had produced, and then came his most wonderful day when it was announced Kushina was pregnant but later, would have to sacrifice his child. Using the Shiki Fujin to seal Kyuubi into an infant. And suddenly, all the pieces began to piece together. Kyuubi, the Yondaime. Wait, so that means, yes, Yondaime couldn't ask another parent to sacrifice their child, so he used his newborn baby, which was you. Naruto felt the world around him spin for a few seconds before coming into focus again by the snapping of Jiraiya's fingers. So that mean that I am the son of the Yondaime, the man who practically set the steps for my own personal hell? He asked, anger laced in his voice, making Jiraiya and Sarutobi flinch. So then, where's my mom? He asked hopefully, but was disappointed when both males averted their eyes at the upfront question, giving Naruto the impression that she either abandoned him in shame or died, the latter confirmed by the wizened Hokage. I guess there's no point in me hating my dad. I mean, I could understand why he did what he did. Thanks for telling me, Gigi. Sarutobi sighed as it had happened better than he had envisioned. Okay, now that's out of the way, I would like to take you as my apprentice Naruto, seeing as though Hitaki isn't interested of training you. Meet me at the ravine near the west waterfall tomorrow and don't be late, said Jiraiya, jumping downwards towards the ground, and Naruto exited via the same route used when he followed after retrieving a medium-sized scroll from the Sandaime, which contained family heirlooms, etc. The first thing Naruto did when he arrived home was turn on the hot water, which steadily filled the bathtub while he read the letters sealed into the scroll, each expressing the sorrow on leaving their firstborn and placing on him a burden that would either shape or break him. As he lay into the hot water that began to ease his joints, he started reading the scroll which described what had happened to him. In the Whirlpool country, it was common to all share the same name. However, most would still keep our original name, such as the four noble clans that founded of them was known as the Okado clan. We brought with us a bloodline limit that made up most the Whirlpool's offensive front. Our clan's bloodline being that we were able to transform into our inner wolf, or select members were able to transform, and many of them turned during the third full moon. We were called werewolves. The clan's history started with. The history of his clan continued, and Naruto decided to skip all that, postponing the history lecture for when he needed it. Putting on some boxers, he lay down on his bed and reviewed what had bad happened. A lot of good had occurred too, and that was Naruto's last thought till falling into a blissful sleep. Jiraiya arrived at Naruto's house and found the blonde wrapped around in his blankets, earning a chuckle out of the hermit, who decided it was time to wake up and poured cold water on him, immediately waking the Jinchuriki, who was gasping and awake. Spluttering, he shouted at Jiraiya. What the hell are you doing? Spluttered Naruto, Fionla managing to wipe the rest of the water on his face. Well kid, a ninja needs to be ready at all time, and if I were an enemy ninja, you would be dead, right? Nodding at how wise he was, but that was short-lived when Naruto called him an old pervert. He just cuffed Naruto's head and told him to get changed into the clothes his mother had sealed into her scroll. Naruto got changed and with that done, began his jog around Konoha while wearing 2 gravity seals which were placed on his chest and thigh, therefore upping the weight on his upper body. The first half of the month was spent on refining Naruto's chakra control, taijutsu, and when asked if Kakashi had taught him any jutsu, taijutsu or anything, Naruto responded by telling Jiraiya that all he learned was tree walking, and every time the team got time to train, Kakashi would always tell him to practice chakra. Jiraiya shook his head in disappointment before starting that part of his training. The last half of the month focused on controlling Naruto's bloodline, which included him reading up the rest of the Okado clan's history, and surprisingly, it interested him to no end as to how using the pelt of a wolf and smearing herbs could actually draw on the wolf's spirit and seal it into objects such as humans. Usually after rough training session, Jiraiya rewarded Naruto with a meal at Ichiraku and explained the part that his former sensei had missed out. While your mum and dad had a blossoming relationship, her childhood friend, Osor Toho, got jealous of Minato because if she hadn't found someone to get engaged to, she would have had to marry Osor, who is currently the clan head of the Umano clan, another one of the original. As they were best friends, he was sure that they would be wed, but then Minato came into the picture and that spoiled all his plans. So, in act of vengeance, he went through the ritual of slaying a wolf, and after retrieving its pelt, he found the right herbs used and performed the animal sealing, but instead of getting parsley, he was given the wrong one, and in such he did turn into a werewolf, but the ingredient made him more vicious, feral, and the bloodlust became too strong, so he couldn't maintain his rational side and he attacked your father, with him being on his mind during the transformation. But Minato didn't fight back till Osor injured your mother, and that was the first time he tested the Harishin no Jutsu, critically injuring Osor, but somehow, he managed to escape. But his last words were this: "When your first child is born, I shall enslave him and use him for my needs. When I get bored of him, I will kill him in the most cruel way imaginable." That's why your father didn't announce your birth, because we weren't the only ones after you. So during the rest of the month, I will train you harshly, nearly to the point of death, because in the Chunin exams, you'll be using your father's last name and you'll have to make him proud. Understood, Naruto? Finished Jiraiya, looking at his godson who was slurping ramen like a dog lapping water. Finally finishing his bowl of ramen, he rested his chopsticks against the rim of the bowl and looked at his mentor, pure fire and determination blazing in his cerulean eyes. "You bet I will, Arrow Sennin," exclaimed Naruto, but instead of getting praise, he got a slap to the head. "Don't call me Arrow Sennin," shouted Jiraiya, glaring at Naruto, who met his gaze with equal intensity. "Then stop being a pervert." During Naruto's werewolf training, Jiraiya evaluated his skills in Naruto's wolf form, and after Naruto transformed back, Jiraiya reported to him that in loss for ninjutsu, his speed was incredible, and because of his ferocity in close combat, he was a force to be reckoned with. Naruto later asked him why he had two tails and why he still had blue eyes when other wolves usually had sickly yellow eyes. He let out an exasperated sigh, which was promptly ignored by the Jiraiya, who had entered full lecture mode. "For your first question, young one, it seems as though Kyuubi has influenced your wolf form somewhat, for you transform on your own. Last time you transformed, your fur was blonde, but the first time, it was auburn, and you were angry that time, which means that it depends on your mood. Auburn, red when you are angry, blonde when you are cow. Arrow Sennin, you're going off the point. Quite, young one, and let your elder talk. You're freaking me out." "Sure, whatever. Now quite, I was saying, when you're in your wolf form, what does your tail feel like?" asked Jiraiya. "Well, my first tail feels fine, but the second feels hot, kind of like fire." "Aha. It seems my theory, as I was saying, Kyuubi has influenced your wolf form, and it looks like each tail grants your form mastery over the fire element while you are still a werewolf, which isn't a surprise seeing as Kyuubi is a fire spirit, and the answer to your second question is that you are a silver blood." "A silver? What? A silver blood?" A silver blood is a member of the Okado clan who can transform into a werewolf and already have dominance over their wolf body, therefore being able to hold their inner wolf at bay, which is really good because it takes a normal member more than a few years to overcome that. Those silver bloods are very rare because for a person to have the DNA of a silver blood, a human who is a natural resistor to the wolf genes must mate with a human who has dormant werewolf genes, therefore their offspring shall have half the resistor's blood and half the wolf blood. Thus, Naruto, your father was a natural resistor, and that's why you still have blue eyes, because that is a way of knowing whether or not you still are in control of your. There any more questions? Finished Jiraiya with a Buddha-like smile, which creeped out Naruto slightly. "Yay, you done?" "Yep." "No, seriously, are you sure you're done?" "Yep, I think so." "Oh, okay," said Naruto as he stood up and walked away from the Jiraiya, who finally realized what Naruto was doing, and he frowned at the rudeness of the boy till shrill feminine screams of delight came from a hedge behind him, causing the hermit to giggle and take out his infamous note and start scribbling down the precise detail of their lovely luscious bodies. The day of the Chunin exams had finally arrived, and ninja or civilian and nobles from all regions had come to see the day where gifted nin would be presented with the task of being a Chunin, and also, the single survivor of the Uchiha massacre would be participating, and everyone wanted to see whether he measured up to his older brother. Spectators cheered when Uchiha Sasuke, garbed in a full black, save the Uchiha fan on the back, body attire, appeared in the Chunin arena with the legendary Sharingan Kakashi via whirlwind of leaves and sakura petals, but the second entrance was more flashy when a thunderbolt struck the ground and it discharged more bolts, rupturing the firm ground and revealing one Uzumaki Naruto. Dress in an outfit of a black jumpsuit. Think Yo Asakura during the shaman tournament. And a coat that reached his bandage-covered feet and black sandal, but what shocked them more was the sword strapped to his back. It was Zabuza Momochi's sword except its hilt was a lot thinner and it was a metallic. He ignored the gasps and whispers rapidly traveling across the crowds of people who fidgeting in their seats as he walked and joined the row of contestants that had passed onto the final stage. He took his place beside his best friend, Shikamaru, who asked the Jinchuriki why the sudden change and got the answer. "It's about time I show my true self." Genma approached the Chunin hopefuls and nodded at his substitute student, who returned it. During training, Naruto had met Genma, Anko Mitarashi, Yuago Azuki, Hayate Gecko and Kurenai Yuhi. Each of them interrogated him at what Kakashi was teaching him, to which he told them not. After talking to them for over an hour, they each thought it would be a good idea to train Naruto, seeing as they had nothing better to do, and an ecstatic Naruto danced all the way home, earning baffled looks and shakes of heads. After a short speech about the duties of a Chunin, Genma announced the first match. Namikaze Naruto vs Hyuga Neji. Many of the crowd jeered at the demon taking the name of their former Hokage, but 8 bursts of killing intent shut them up, and they stayed that way even after the third Hokage explained Naruto's heritage. "So, just because you have the last name of a hailed ninja, you think that your fate to lose to me has changed? Then you are sorely mistaken," said the arrogant Hyuga, spreading his feet apart while entering the Hyuga clan taijutsu stance. Naruto remained silent and waited for Genma to begin the match. He said begin, and Neji moved in at Jonin speeds and opened a barrage of chakra-infused punches, but they all met air as Naruto reappeared behind Neji and hefting Kabuikiri. He slashed sideways, but his wrist was grasped by Neji. For the first time during the entire thing, Naruto spoke, and what he did next shocked the entire ninja population. "That was the right way to block my attack," he said. "Rasenpuu." A whirlwind rotated around the duo. Small blades of wind sliced into Neji's flesh and he held on before being blown away. Thin streaks of blood trailed from him as he landed in a crouch and looked at the now charging Naruto, who pushed chakra into Kabuikiri, making it as thin as a kusanagi and stabbing it at Neji. Having enough time to act, Neji whipped out a kunai in an attempt to stop the offending object, but it sliced right through it and straight into his shoulder. "That, Neji, was the wrong way to block my attack." Naruto then kicked Neji, forcefully unloading the sword from his shoulder and making him cry out in pain. "So, Hyuga Neji, let's see if your bloodline is better than mine," said Naruto as he made several hand signs before calling out. "Megan. Chishio Geshoku." Blue chakra began to spin rapidly around Naruto and rose to the sky before dispersing. A black darkness started to cover the sky, and many looked on in surprise as the sunny sky turned into darkness. A blood-red moon grew out and took its place in the middle of the sky, bathing the stadium in a bloody glow as bones crunching and cracking could be heard, followed by a piercing howl. Neji Hyuga, known as a prodigy, one of the best of the Hyuga branch clan, if not the whole of the clan, surpassing the heir, Hinata, in power, and was second to Hyuga Heishi, his uncle. Ever since the death of his father, his hatred for the main branch members had gradually began to build, therefore eradicating all sense of fear for, however, was a completely different thing. He, along with the audience, watched in morbid fascination as Naruto's form shimmered in and out of sound of bones snapping and breaking made him shudder in fear. While Naruto transformed, he was currently thanking and praising his mother. His jumpsuit was designed to bond with his muscle structure, so when he transformed, it would form an extra layer under the fur, and another plus was during the reconstruction process. The pain of his muscles and bones reordering themselves to suit his bulky shape would lessen each time he turned. A few minutes later, the large half-man, half-wolf creature shrugged off its coat and bared its fang at its opponent. Without warning, it lunged forward, its jaws ajar, intent on severing a limb or head, but its progress was impeded by a dome of concentrated chakra, fracturing its jawbone and breaking a few ribs. Naruto came to a halt and whimpered as his injuries were beginning to heal, and he started at the dissipating chakra dome. From what he knew about the Hyuga's taijutsu, it would be pure folly to compete in a hand-to-hand match, and with their Byakugan, Evil Eye, They had complete 360-degree field of vision, which meant that they could attack and defend from all sides save the blind spot behind their necks, but that would take a lot of tricks, even for himself. This conclusion led Naruto to believe that it seemed using his wolf form would be pointless because of from the technique just performed, which he identified as the Hakesho Kaiden, 8 trigram palms heavenly spin. Rushing in head first would prove disastrous, and his broken ribs were evidence of that. Groaning, though it came out as a growl, he stood up to his full height and watched in amusement when Neji had to look up to meet his predatory grin. Sweat trickled down Neji's forehead as he settled into the Jukin, gentle fist, and wearily watched the wolf crouch, before it was shooting forward again towards him. Kakashi-sensei, what's happened to Naruto? Asked Sakura, looking at the fight below. Kakashi didn't answer for a few minutes till he closed his eye and covered it with his forehead protector. From what my Sharingan, copy wheel, can see, Naruto has completely turned into whatever that is, and it looks like it more of an advantage than a hindrance. What do you mean, Kakashi? Asked Sasuke. His physical strength and speed have increased tenfold, though it's not surprising with those muscles, so that it compensates for the lack of jutsu usage. Also, if Neji gets caught in those jaws, he's dead, he said grimly. So, how did Naruto get that power? Said Sasuke, a familiar look of hunger in his eyes. The type that you can't get Uchiha, replied Anko, who had just arrived shortly, saying she had to buy some dango if she was going to enjoy Naruto's fight when Kurenai asked her where she had been. What do you mean, with these eyes? Anything is attainable to me, said Sasuke, activating his Sharingan for further emphasis, the two tones spinning round his pupil. What I mean, dipshit, is that's Naru-chan's Kekkei Genkai. Naruto has a Kekkeigankai? Exclaimed Ino and Sakura, causing several people behind, beside and in front of them to rub their ears. Also, it made Neji and Naruto pause as they were about to charge at each other, though Neji recovered quickly and jumped Naruto, making him yelp in surprise at being suddenly tackled to the ground. Keep it down, Gakis. Anko, wincing at the pitch of their voice, making Sakura and Ino fidget in embarrassment. Now, as I was saying, Naruto has got Kekkei Genkai, and before you ask, she looked at the red-faced duo. I do know about it, but I am not gonna tell ya. Why not? Asked Kakashi, Anko having his full attention. I mean, you weren't really interested about him before, so you not gonna be now, she said, jabbing his chest with her finger. What do you mean not really interested? Oh see, Mon Kakashi, Naru-chan asked you to train him. You flat out ignored him and now you're trying to dismiss it, she heatedly replied, stepping closer so their eyes were locked. Yes, I may have not trained Naruto, however, you saw Sasuke opponent, and if not leaving him crippled, Gaara would kill Sasuke. Yeah, I mean, Gaara is a psychopath and could kill Sasuke-kun, said Sakura, adding her 2 cents to the conversation and feeling really proud of herself at defending her future husband, but then turned a bright red when getting odd looks, though most people shook their head in pity. While you say that, think about Naruto, who is supposedly the dead last. Now, let's gauge the difference of the matches. Sasuke is the rookie of the year, so he can hold his own against Gaara, but Naruto is a dead last with no absolute skill and is going against the rookie of last year who has more experience and, to add more trouble, is a Hyuga. Yeah, Sasuke really needs more training, she finished, not giving Kakashi the chance to retort because she walked away from him and sat next to Kurenai and Asuma, who tried to snake an arm around Kurenai's shoulder, but her gaze made him reconsider his action. Neji turned left, narrowly avoiding a claw aimed at his torso, and using his momentum, created a short Kaiden that ground against Naruto and flung him away. Naruto shortly got back up and charged at Neji again, the same result occurring. Him being blasted away by Kaiden. Neji huffed in annoyance and studied Naruto critically. So far, the same thing had happened over and over again, and quite frankly, Neji didn't have the amount of chakra to keep performing Kaiden a lot of times. Heck, he had exceeded his limit, which was 12 Kaidens a day, and so far, he had performed 14. He ran at Naruto and, jumping up, delivered a quick kick to the head that did connect, pushing Naruto backwards slightly, but Naruto retaliated with a swipe of his paw to Neji's chest, sending him a few feet away from Naruto. Neji coughed up a small amount of blood before standing up. He had to end the fight. Now, Naruto swiped at Neji once more, who used his hand to parry the blow away, his hand shaking from the force of the attack though he ignored it, and channeling chakra to his hand, shot his chakra-infused palm at Naruto's heart in hope of delivering the final blow, but instead, Neji's palm stopped when striking Naruto's fur, which started to glow slightly blue. Neji hastily removed his hand and backflipped backwards, creating space between him and Naruto, who was stood still, his eyes glazed. Blood, detached body parts and collapsed buildings. That was all Naruto could see as he stood up, groaning while rubbing his head from the forming migraine. Something sped through the air and hit Naruto on his forehead, causing him to fall to the ground. He shook the cobwebs from his mind and, touching his sore head, looked at his fingers which were covered in blood. His breath hitched in his throat when he looked at the offending object. A heart that was surrounded by a slowly spreading pool of blood. He retched at the sight, but then was surprised by a large dog-like thing landing before him, its dark blue mane matted with speckles of blood. Naruto heard a squelching sound and looked down. The thing paw had crushed the bleeding organ prior to its entrance. Its sickly yellow eyes locked with Naruto's sapphire orbs, momentarily freezing him on the spot. Its head suddenly shot forward, powerful jaws closing around Naruto's heading, causing him to scream out. "Shut the fuck up, you spineless shitbag!" roared Kyuubi, having awoke from his container shrieking. "God, you sound like a fucking baby being spanked," he added, using his claw to stop the ringing in his very sensitive ear. Naruto ignored the comment, panting while glancing around, looking for the dog about to hit his head off. Not finding it, he directed his attention to the fox in front of him. "What the fuck was that?" he managed to say. "The hit the Hyuga gave you jacked up. Instead of killing you, you absorbed the extra chakra and somehow, most of it was forced into your brain, giving you that illusion," Kyuubi flawlessly lied. Naruto unwillingly nodded his head before exiting his mindscape. Kyuubi rose from the ground, walked towards the gate, forcing a bit of his chakra into the seal, making it split in half as the gate creaked loudly while parting, giving Kyuubi access to the rest of Naruto's mind. He trotted past several turns and ended up at a dead end, facing a wide wall that stretched all the way through the darkness, but what struck Kyuubi was the big black blob in the middle of the wall, a small vortex of dark blue chakra spiraling around it. He pushed his chakra into the vortex and felt himself being drained, so he cut the flow of chakra. What happened next made him bare his fangs. The blob was beginning to take shape, a long snout forming from it inky blackness. Neji backed away from Naruto, who was on all fours, chakra flaring wildly around him as his body began changing to his normal form. This went on for a few minutes till a crater formed around Naruto because of his chakra. He rose to one knee, panting heavily. Neji was shocked that Naruto wasn't dead. "What? You surprised I am not dead?" said Naruto, fully rising to his feet. "Doesn't matter if you're dead or not. Your fate is to lose to me," replied Neji, charging chakra for one final kaiden. "Bullshit. All you talk about is fate, Neji, but behind that tough exterior, I think you're nothing but a scared little boy hiding behind fate," said Naruto, matching Neji's output of chakra. "Hiding behind fate? Don't make assumptions, Uzumaki. I hide behind nothing," Neji retorted, his chakra slightly increasing, but Naruto matched, then exceeded it, both oblivious to the looks of astonishment being given from the audience. "Damn, that's a lot of chakra," said Kotetsu. "You think that's a lot? Just wait till Naruto-kun stops playing around with Neji and gets serious," said Anko, excited at seeing the outcome of the match. Kakashi looked on, indifferent though mentally. He was astounded at how much chakra Naruto had. Sasuke glared at Naruto while Sakura and the rest of the nin were asking themselves how much chakra Naruto had. "I am not making assumptions, Neji, only the facts. You tell people that it's their fate to lose, but all you do is discourage them so that they don't perform to their fullest potential. So in other words, you're nothing but a coward using fate to hide behind," said Naruto. "Shut up, I don't hide behind fate. It's nothing but the truth. I myself an example of fate," he retorted, slightly peeved. "You're an example of fate? What do you mean?" "Everyone thinks the Hyuga clan is a clan with no faults in it, but I beg to differ. The Hyuga clan harbors its own dark secrets," he said, turning his head and looking Hyuga Hiyashi in the eye. "What secret?" asked Naruto, his interest piqued. When Hinata-sama and I were children, Kumo's best ninja entered Konoha, kidnapped Hinata-sama, and as he was about to make his escape, Hiyashi-sama killed the nin, and because Konoha and Kumo were at the end of a long war, they were about to sign a peace treaty, but the death of a Kumo nin dying, they demanded Hiyashi-sama's body for compensation. The Hyuga Council didn't want the future head of the Hyuga clan to die, so instead, they traded my father for him, said Neji. The crowd tried to stifle gasps but were unsuccessful. Another secret of the Hyuga clan is their way of preserving the Byakugan is with this, he said, removing his headband showing a seal that looked like a X in the middle of his forehead with 2 hooks on either side. What is that? Naruto asked, now really intrigued. This is the seal that prevents anyone from gaining the Byakugan, and also, to make sure that we do not betray the main branch clan. The main branch clan only have to perform one hand sign and our minds are destroyed. Now you see, everyone has an inevitable course of events they must follow, and you shall fulfill yours. Losing to me, said Neji, charging at Naruto. We'll see about that, shouted Naruto, channeling a lot of chakra into Kabuikiri Huncho and running at Neji. Now, we see the climax of this fated fight, said Choji, stuffing his face with potato chips. I think Naruto's going to win. What do you think, Shikimaru? Meh, Naruto's gonna win this match. Yeah, I mean, there's something about him that's changed. Right before meeting Naruto in the middle of the arena, Neji forced his weight on his right leg, making him turn, and he took advantage of the momentum, spinning round and expelling chakra through all his tenketsu, creating a dome of chakra that started picking up speed, causing it to look like a vortex. Naruto grinned and, following Neji's example, spun on sole of his right foot, spinning round before swinging his sword as hard as he could, infusing wind chakra in it and shouting, Karit Shikyo Gai, Reaper Death Scythe, sending a violent burst of wind that streaked through the air, forming shapes of scythes. Unknown to him, Naruto had used a bit of Kyuubi's chakra before he used the jutsu. The wind scythes meet Neji's Kaiden, causing the ground to rupture from the amount of power being forced against each other, but unexpectedly, the revolving chakra dome burst into a tower of flames. The audience covered their faces from the heat being produced by Naruto's jutsu. As the light died down, the last of the embers dissipated and the darkness of the sky receded into the now setting blood-red moon. Naruto was stood beside a heavily panting Neji who was lying on the ground face up. How? Neji croaked, looking at Naruto. Although there is fate, Neji, it doesn't control anyone. Everyone has a fate, but they have the ability to change it, not be controlled by it, and hopefully, you can change yours, said Naruto, transforming Kabuikiri to its normal form and walking away from the arena as Genma announced him the winner of the match. Naruto leaned against the nearest locker and unwrapped the bandages around his right arm, letting blood slid down it from the deep gash based on his bicep. He wondered if something was wrong because the wound wasn't healing, but was put at ease when the tissue of his bicep stretched and steam rose from the now healed gash. He walked out of the changing rooms, up the stairs, and ignoring the stares he got, sat next to Choji, who offered him a bag of chips, to which he happily complied. Hey Naruto, that was an awesome fight, said Choji. Thanks. Whose match is next? Quote, I thinks it's Sasuke's. Oh, well, this ought to be interesting. Meh. Both of you quiet down, it's about to start. Watch this, you're about to piss your pants, said Kakashi, looking at Sasuke as he applied the method of tree climbing to stick to the wall and sticking his palm and charged lightning chakra. You taught him the Chidori, 1000 birds, asked Guy. Yeah, he has the Sharingan and speed for it, so he was suited for it. What's the Chidori? Asked Sakura. This time, Naruto answered it for her. The Chidori, also known as 1000 birds due to the noise of chirping birds when used, is a lightning-based technique created by Hitaki Kakashi when my dad tried to teach him the Rasengan, spiraling sphere. But Kakashi couldn't infuse his lightning element chakra into it. So in other words, he copied the basics of my dad's original jutsu but add extra bits. Quote, that's why they call him the copycat ninja, because he copies jutsu then screws them up, mumbled Naruto to himself, though Kakashi heard the last bit. You got something to say, Naruto? Did you say something, Kakashi? Kakashi did nothing but grind his teeth together in annoyance. What's the Rasengan? Asked Ino. Naruto drew in an exasperated and stretching out his hand in form of his fellow blonde, gathered wind and chakra, forming a pure blue sphere of wind. That is the Rasengan. Several people's eyes widened at seeing the fourth son performing his original jutsu. He ignored the gasps and turned his attention to the match below. Sasuke ran at the sand ort around Gaara and struck it with his hand, which slid right through the sand and pierced Gaara's shoulder. "Gaara!" shouted Temari, she and Kankuro jumping down to get their brother. The Yandere Kasekage sneered behind his mask and, moving his two fingers in a precise motion, signaled something to his ninja, who disappeared in a poof of smoke. The invasion had began. Delicate feathers gently floated from the sky, encasing the entire stadium and lulling the civilian population into a false sleep. The Junin and Chunin managed to break the large-scale genjutsu caste and made their main priority to wake the sleeping people, but then, explosions rocked Konoha, shaking the granite pillars holding the roof, which collapsed on each other. Several nins voiced their wonder as to what was going on, but Naruto sped past them, following Sasuke and the sand trio, who had made a break for, hoping the trees could give them enough cover for Gaara to heal. "Where you going, Naruto?" yelled Kakashi. "I am going to," and whatever Naruto was going to say was lost in the roar that emanated from the army of nin wearing balaclavas and headbands with a musical quaver note engraved into metal plates jumping down from the trees hanging over the main arena. "Who are they?" asked some random Chunin. Kakashi was about to take a guess but changed his answer when an Anbu appeared beside him and whispered something that no one caught. "I see. Okay. We are under attack and the invading ninja are wearing those headbands," pointing at the masked nin appearing from thin air, showing Kakashi they knew the Shushin, body flicker. "Attack any of those, and if you can, try and capture some. Now attack." Naruto. "What Hitaki?" he said, irritation evident in his tone of voice. Kakashi felt his temper rising. "Arg, whatever. Just chase after Sasuke, make sure to back him up and take anyone with you." Figured it would be about the Uchiha. Kakashi was about to reply, but Naruto turned and shouted, "Looks like we have to chase Sasuke's prissy ass, so I need backup. If you got guts, follow me." He jumped into the ground and, while descending, swung his sword, cleaving three nin in half. Ten, Choji, Ino, Shikamaru, Choji and Sakura felt bile rise to their throats at seeing the nin's innards hanging out of their mutilated stomach. Naruto's call broke them out of their stupor and they hurried, not only to catch up to the blonde acting as team leader, but because they knew much more bloodshed would come and that they didn't want to see. Not right now anyway. Sasuke hopped from one branch to another, avoiding a trio of kunai that multiplied. "Take Gaara with you, I'll stay and hold him off," said Kankuro, grabbing the wrapped item from his back and slamming it front of him. "But, no Temari, we need Gaara because he's the main component in this plan. Now hurry up and get going." "Okay, but be careful, little brother," said Temari before leaping through the nearby hedge and making a break for it. Sasuke had his regular, "I am more superior but secretly gay," smirk and balanced a kunai on his finger. "So what, you can balance a messily kunai? That's nothing compared to this," he yelled, pulling the wrappings around the item, revealing a figure with a large messy mop of brown hair that partially covered the third eye above the other two eyes. Wearing a gray garment, it moved its right arms and flexed the muscles. Sasuke's eyes widened. "Looks like my puppet surprised you. We're gonna have fun with this one, Karasu," said Kankuro, wiggling his pinky and thumb, making Karasu bend forward and lower itself down to a crouching position, opening its palms. Sasuke then proceeded to lean left when Karasu blurred past him. He flicked the kunai he was balancing into the air and quickly flung it at Kankuro, throwing two more for extra measure, but all he heard was a thunk and there stood Karasu, plucking the kunai out and opening its palms, kunai appearing in each. Sasuke jumped up, narrowly avoiding a thrust from Karasu and thinking on his feet while he was upside down, began to make hand seals. Kankuro made movements with his finger and Karasu shot towards Sasuke at high speeds. Sasuke inhaled air and shouted, "Kaden! Hosenka no Jutsu! Fire release! Mythical Fire Phoenix technique!" His throat began to get warm as he prepared his jutsu. As the heated air got too hot to contain, Sasuke exhaled, allowing several small balls of embers to enlarge, forming medium-sized fireballs that impacted harshly against Karasu, sending it a few feet back, and the hidden shuriken inside the fireballs whizzed through the air, leaving a red trail courtesy of the heat they had been contained in, and embedded themselves into Kankuro, pushing him off the current branch he was occupying, but not before he threw a kunai at Sasuke with an exploding tag attached to it that blew up in middle, blinding him and giving Karasu enough time to appear behind Sasuke, its arm detaching from the elbow, revealing a steel saw rotating at high speeds aimed at Sasuke's head, and he wasn't in the position to stop or block it. Naruto and the rest of the genin sped from tree to tree, Naruto using his nose to locate Sasuke's scent. Sakura, Choji and Ino huffed and puffed, trying to keep up but failed to. "Let's stop here, I need to catch my breath," said Sakura. Naruto nodded and performed some hand signs before whispering something that the genin couldn't decipher. A gentle breeze swept by Naruto and he frowned. Ino saw his shoulders rise, his muscles tense, and knew something was wrong. "What is it, Naruto?" she asked. "7 ninja, probably from the invading force, are tailing us and are closing in," H replied. "Well then we have to move," shouted Sakura, looking around frantically. "No point. If we had to run, only I and Ten would make it cause we have the speed," he said bluntly. Sakura wanted to say something, but Shikamaru said Naruto was right and the only way was to stall. Asked who would. Shikamaru volunteered and Choji decided to stay with him. He wished them good luck, and as they were about to go, Ino complained about her being tired, so Naruto was forced to carry her bridal style, gaining looks of envy to which Ino ignored as she snuggled into Naruto's chest, his rhythmic heartbeat making her feel comfortable. The gang arrived at the scene of a wooden thing speeding at Sasuke with a swirling saw aimed at his head. Naruto summoned a clone that disappeared and reappeared between the two, effectively breaking the saw in half by swinging Kabuikiri vertically, slicing right through the puppet too. "Never thought the great Uchiha Sasuke would need help," said Naruto, dispelling his clone. Sasuke just snorted at the comment and turned round. "She went this way. I know, I can smell her scent." As they set off, a large thing flew through the air and one of its arms shot forward and grabbed Naruto, pulling his leg and dragging him back. He made a clone to take Ino to safety and then found himself enclosed in something. A kunai suddenly appeared through a slot, stabbing him in the leg and doctoring blood. Naruto tried to create a Rasengan but couldn't use his arm. More kunai pierced and he racked his brain for a plan. The sound nin ran towards Shikamaru but found himself frozen. He looked down and saw a shadow extending from him to the Brad kneeling with his hands in a rat hand sign. Kage main no jutsu, shadow possession, success. Byakuya no jutsu, expansion jutsu, roared Choji, his body beginning to space out and enlarge. Nakuden haru sencha, spiked bullet tank. Choji encircled his body with numerous wires of kunai before tucking his legs and arms, making a large spinning ball road with sharp kunai, and it hurtled to the nin who got squashed and punctured painfully. Shikamaru and Choji kept on using the tactic, greatly reducing the nin's numbers, but they were now running on low. "Well Chuki, it's been a good ride. Yeah, I hope heaven has potato chips. Is that all you think of?" Quote, "Pretty much, yep." A ninja launched himself at Choji with a katana in hand, but fortunately, Asuma landed on his back, snapping it half. "Sorry I am late guys. Had some things to take care of." "Hey, don't worry, we weren't in rush." Seeing a Junin with a sash that was a gray color with the symbol for fire, the sound genin's bravado reduced because only royal guardians of the daimyo could wear that. "You guys mind if I take them?" asked Asuma, grabbing and fitting his trench knives. "Knock yourself out, both Choji and Shikamaru." Asuma said nothing but grin. "For the love of Kami-sama, enough with the kunai," said Naruto, already nursing deep cuts. So far, he had been inside the puppet for a few minutes and 33 kunai had been used, but luckily, Kyuubi took care of all the wounds, though the healing took longer. He then heard the sound of buzzing outside the wooden dome that trapped him. A second later, the wood splintered and groaned as it was pulled sideways, freeing Naruto, who took big gulps of fresh oxygen. He turned to thank his savior and saw Aburame Shino stood surrounded by bees in all their yellow and black stripped glory. "Thanks Shino," breathed Naruto. Shino nodded and lifting his arms, a colony of bugs and stuff flew out, spreading throughout the forest. The sun glared at it, giving it the refreshing and tranquil appearance. Noting that only he and Shino were there, he asked the bug user, who replied by telling him he convinced them to head off after Temari and Gaara. Naruto nodded at the boy's clear intelligence. Neither expected Kankuro to burst through the bushes, armed with another puppet save it was clearly larger than the other two, and commanded to crush the Konoha genin. Shino told Naruto that he missed his chance to fight and would take care of him. Naruto complied and grabbing his legs, placed 2 fingers to his ankle, a resounding click echoing till it faded. Naruto then shot off, knocking over the large oak he had recently stood on. Turning his attention to the puppet user, Shino repeated the action of spreading his arms wide, letting the numerous insects and bugs seep out his sleeves. Naruto landed on a branch, clearly panting at having to run so far. He sniffed the air and picked up their scents. He sighed, stretched his legs by squatting, then started running. As Naruto closed in on Sasuke and the girls, he saw that all 3 girls were stuck to a separate tree by paw-looking thing made of hardened sand and felt himself grow more angry when each of them gasped for air subconsciously when the paw seemed to shrink. The second thing that made him angry was when Sasuke, clearly low on chakra, performed a Chidori and charge at Gaara, who grinned madly and jumped at Sasuke, cocking his sand claw back and then bring it forward, clashing with Sasuke's Chidori, which powered down at the last moment, then powered back up again, and Naruto saw marks appear and cover Sasuke's neck, hand, leg and face. Blood splattered against tree bark, but Naruto wasn't sure whose blood it was till Gaara's arm made of sand dissolved. Sasuke, due to continuous strain on his body, collapsed. Gaara stood, still, not moving one bit as memories of his childhood flashed in and out of his mind. He let out a heart-clenching roar, the excess sand from the floor rising and making a new arm, complete with tribal markings that stretched all the way to his newly made tail. Naruto saw the gleam in Gaara's eyes as he leapt from the ground and lunged at Sasuke. Naruto chose that moment to strike by jumping from his hiding spot and delivering an axe kick to Gaara's head, sending him into a tree, denting it, and the creaking sound it made suggested it was going to fall if given that extra push. In the corner of his eye, Gaara's prone body jerked. Then his eyes unexpectedly snapped open, his teal eyes transforming into black orbs that had a gold diamond in the middle with 4 black dots on each side of the diamond. Naruto felt the hair on his back rise as Gaara, Shukaku, expelled killing intent on a whole other level, but Naruto couldn't ponder on that thought because at imaginable speeds, Gaara crashed into him and it threw him through 3 trees before coming to a halt as he smacked his head and back against another large oak. A mind-shattering wave of pain washed over his body, his cries of pain being music to Gaara's ear. The next feeling Naruto got was numbness, and the approaching darkness took him. Naruto heard the drip-drop of water as it had patted the water, joining the endless stream running throughout his mindscape. He opened his eyes and expected to see Kyuubi looking at him with boredom, but all that met him was silence. Fully opening his eyes, Naruto saw the 2 gates that held Kyuubi at bay were ajar, each at one end of the massive jail. A loud growl echoed, which startled Naruto, forcing him to his feet and taking a defensive, though the vibrating in the back of his head made him see double. Next, a deep bellow made him concentrate to find the source, which was a couple of feet away. Kyuubi bared his fangs at the dog of the same stature as him finish its materialization. "Kukuku, still sour as always, I see. What do you want and how is your mark on the boy?" asked Kyuubi, the 9 tails behind him stiffening, showing his annoyance and nervousness. The midnight black-furred dog closed and opened its jaws, thinking of an answer. "Well, I sensed something inside that I just had to be a part of," it replied, its sickly yellow silted orbs twinkling malevolently. "Had to be a part of? Don't make me laugh. You only marked him because I was within him." "Yeah, that probably contributed to me marking him." Red and yellow glared at each other, their bloodlust and killer intent being released from every pore. Tails twitching every so often, each waiting in anticipation for someone to make the first move. The dog grew irritated, and that was identified by its black tails tipped with snow white that stood out in contrast, waving every second, turning and dipping sharply. Not being able to take the pregnant silence, it acted first by shooting its tails at Kyuubi, who blurred from existence. Kyuubi appeared behind it and swung his tails, the air in between the giant animals whipping wildly as Kyuubi's tails closed in on the dog's head. It ducked, the glowing red tails retracting back to their master, Kyuubi growling at missing. The dog lashed out with its paw. Kyuubi caught the thrust with two tails and slammed it into the wall, making the dog bellow. Kyuubi jumped back and angled his tails to face his opponent and began to flow Yuki his tails, a blue flame igniting on the tip of each. Kitsune Bai, Foxfire, yelled Kyuubi, a stream of blue fire erupting from each tail, combing to make a large torrent of red-hot flames bear down on the disoriented dog who just managed to regain his bearings at the right time and stabbing his tail into the paw length shouted. Kuchiku Nami, Destruction Wave. The water below them shook and bubbled as it rose, meeting the fire and exploding into a shower of water droplets. Kyuubi exhaled through his nose, clearing the hissing steam. Still as good as ever, Just shut up and go. Not till I see the host. Oh look, here he comes. Naruto ran to where he heard the explosion and found himself being stared at by two very big creatures. "Who the hell is that?" screamed Naruto, pointing at the dog sat on its hind feet and looking at him inquiringly. "Is your container?" it asked, still looked at Naruto, unnerving the blonde abbot. "Unfortunately, yes," replied Kyuubi. "I see," was all it said before impaling Naruto with its Yuki-infused tail. "What the hell was that?" yelled Kyuubi. "It's a present on my behalf. I'll see you later, Ni-chan," said the dog, nearing the puddle of darkness and being absorbed into it, its five tails swishing left to right. "What the hell have you done now? Oh sore." Gaara stalked up to Naruto, salivating as he raised his sand paw so he could crush Naruto but was forced several meters away by a fist to the gut. Gaara saw Naruto's appearance, increasing his lust for battle. Somehow, Naruto's nails and fangs had grown to the size they would be when he was full wolf. His muscles had grown too, and the most shocking thing was that instead of his normal yellow eyes, they were a sickly yellow color. He cracked his knuckles and then, with a massive amount of dark blue chakra and killing ki spilling out of him, Naruto lunged at Gaara. Gaara jumped sideways. Naruto wasted no time and chased after him, managing to land a knee in Gaara's face, and not having finished with his fellow Jinchuriki, Naruto rammed his fist into Gaara's abdomen, eliciting a strangled, shocking sound. Naruto relentlessly continued to pound into Gaara. Gaara, having had enough of bleeding, used his raccoon tail and tried to hit Naruto, but he backflipped from the attack onto another tree. "Why do you run away, Namikaze Naruto? I relish this fight and mother demands blood," said Gaara, his tongue rolling out of his mouth. "Oh yeah, the only blood that's going to be shed is yours," yelled Naruto, speeding towards Gaara with a Rasengan in his hand that was purple in color. Sarutobi moved left, evading a high-speed kick aimed at his head. He threw forward a chakra-infused fist, landing it smack in the middle of his opponent's face, sending his opponent into his own summoned trees. Suiten. Daibakufu no Jutsu. Water Element. Grand Waterfall Skill. The white-haired man stuck his hand out, using his chakra to manipulate the moisture in the air, making several droplets of water gather together and form a spinning cyclone of water. The water rushed at the lone Sandame, who made hand seals that ended in a tiger seal, before slamming his hand down onto the ground. A wall made of earth instantly rose, right in time to defend against the cyclone water. Not anticipating the power of the water cyclone, it broke the earth wall, causing boulders and chunks of rock to break off from it. Sarutobi used each rock as a springboard to land on the square top of the wall, but a blind punch to the shoulder, dislocating it, sent the Sandame reeling into the dense forest that was previously conjured. He smacked the nearest root but wasn't prepared enough to defend himself against a flurry of well-placed hits from the first Hokage, that focused on his pressure points, his body erupting in a wave of pain. A grunt escaped his mouth as roots snaked out from nowhere and coiled around his ankles and wrists, forcing him to face Orochimaru's snake-like eyes and pale smug face. "Give and accept your fate, Sarutobi-sensei," said Orochimaru, his tongue flickering in and out of his mouth. "Never, I gave you a chance to escape because I thought you would have changed, but I was wrong and I shall rectify my mistake today," the Hokage said, a blue sphere of chakra surrounding him and breaking the roots that bound him. Sarutobi created 4 clones as a distraction, which he used to get some distance between him the previous Hokages. Orochimaru chuckled darkly as the Shodem and the Nidame phased through the clones and charged at Sarutobi. The old man landed on a branch and rapidly performed hand seals before using the summoning jutsu. A puff of smoke indicated the success of the jutsu, and as the Shoden raised his fist, a hairy palm slammed into his chest. Now Enma. Henge. Konganoi, transformation. Adamantine Nyoi, shouted Sarutobi, the column of smoke increasing in density at the use of another jutsu, and using Konoha's founder and the Nidaim's momentary blindness. Sarutobi came crashing down with a thick stick. Both of his opponents sidestepped the attack at the last minute. He cursed silently, avoiding a branch to the face. Deciding to stall for time, Sarutobi prepared his chakra. "Why are you attacking Orochimaru?" asked the wizened Hokage, catching the Shodai in the chin with his white-capped adamantine staff. "Why I attacked Konoha? I detest the village for picking that blonde twit over my superior skills," said Orochimaru, trying to pinpoint his sensei's chakra but to no avail, due to the constant clanking of weapons clashing and burst of chakra from all three Hokages. "You are attacking Konoha because Minato was chosen instead of you? You plan on killing thousands of innocents because you were deemed unfit for the title of Hokage? I see that my bright and talented former pupil is gone, replaced by the creature I see before me," shouted Sarutobi, crashing down on Orochimaru with Konganoi, but his attack was parried by the sudden appearance of Orochimaru's grasscutter. "No, Sarutobi-sensei. Not only that, but because there is something in Konoha, better yet under it, that I want, which has been sealed since the birth of Konoha," replied Orochimaru, using Kusanagi to keep Sarutobi at arm's length. "What would be in Konoha that you could possibly be so desperate to get your hands on, risking the destruction of your own home village? Tell me, sensei, have you ever wondered why the first Hokage decided to build the forest that surrounds Konoha on his own, not letting the forest grow by itself?" Sarutobi's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "What are you pointing at Orochimaru?" he thought. Orochimaru saw the look on the Hokage's face and decided to clarify his point. "Have you looked at the forest surrounding Konoha from an aerial point?" Sarutobi nodded his head, still not understanding his most talented student. "Hasn't it piqued your curiosity as to why it seems to be modeled exactly after a Four Seasons seal?" said Orochimaru, a manic grin forming on his pale face. Sarutobi's eyes widened in shock. He had indeed noticed the forest's weird pattern but passed it off as the trees growing in strange places, so he chose not to delve into it. "Now if you haven't figured it out, I'll explain. What is the one thing that the first Hokage's wood element could control, and if he made the trees form a seal around Konoha, what exactly is sealed there?" finished Orochimaru. Enjoying the sight of the blood draining from his former teacher's face, Sarutobi finally understood Orochimaru's evil plot. The sphere of raw chakra met the demon-enhanced fist of Gaara. The impact of both attacks created a whirlwind that uprooted most of the tress. Both genin flew back from the collision, blood dripping down both their respective arms, which were sore from the force of their clash. Naruto gave out a primal roar as more chakra, that was foreign to him, increased in amount, driving him past the point of control as his wolf began to take over. Only this time, there was no transformation. It seemed as though his inner wolf had only got control of his mind and actions, which baffled the blonde who was looking at the void that showed all that happened outside the left section of his mind where his inner wolf resided. During the fight that had ensued between the Jinchuriki, Gaara had noticed that, although not having full control, his opponent still retained a significant amount of sanity. But now, he had a feeling that he was in a fight till the end, especially when a grin similar to his drew itself on Naruto's face. Before Gaara's eyes, his foe seemed to have disappeared before appearing right behind him. Blood splattered everywhere as Naruto's hand slowly slid from the hole located in Gaara's abdomen. "I would have thought you would have put up a better challenge," said Naruto, his distorted voice thick with bloodlust that began to weigh down Gaara's bleeding form. "But it looks like I was wrong," said Naruto, flicking away Gaara in a disgusted manner. A few seconds later, a wave of sand rose from the depths of the forest, causing the blonde to lazily look behind him. The massive amount of ki oozing from the rising Gaara did not affect him, not even the escalating tower of sand seemed to faze him. Suddenly, Gaara's semi-conscious body violently jerked upwards, the pillar of sand beginning to take shape, and from the grains in the sky, a portly body began to solidify. As the cloud of sand grew in size, legs, arms and ears grew, soon forming a large raccoon with tribal markings that extended from its back to its long tail that was composed of hardened scales. Gaara landed onto the raccoon and, sitting on the creature's head, performed Tanuki Niri no Jutsu, forced sleep technique, his head slumped forward and down. Wolf Naruto looked up, interested at what was to happen, and grinned when the black empty eyes on the raccoon turned yellow. A maniac cackle erupted from the raccoon. As its eyes widened in a frenzy, the still tail slithered from tree to tree. "Oh yeah, I am finally out and ready to partyyyy," screamed Shukaku, his hot-ranked breath blasting Naruto in the face, making him cringe his nose in disgust. Naruto grew more irritated as the demon before him continued to babble about freedom, blood, and killing sprees. Having had enough of spit and Shukaku's putrid breath landing in his face, Naruto leapt up to the colossal figure towering in front of him, halting Shukaku's mindless ranting with a fierce punch to the snout. Surprised, tan shuriken eyes closed onto the glowing thing on its nose. Nothing in the surrounding area dared to move. Unsuspectingly, Shukaku gave a mighty bellow, the wind from its mouth blowing Naruto into the tress, each toppling onto him. Shukaku began to laugh at how he easily disposed of his opponent, but shut up when a foot slammed into his cheek, surprising the Tanuki. The force of the kick had forced him backwards. Now his surprise was replaced by eagerness. Shukaku retaliated with renewed vigor, his tail hitting Naruto out of the sky, but as Naruto rose, both demons had matching grins on their faces that promised a blood battle. Uchiha Sasuke looked on, surprised at the battle occurring before him. Never had he seen his dead last teammate, and self-proclaimed Hokage, fight with such ferocity. Naruto and Shukaku exchanged hits that tore large gashes across the forest's rich soil. With a cry of pain and a grunt of annoyance, Sasuke hauled his pain-racked body up into a sitting position. "Damn," he hissed, "I won't be able to get the girls and myself out of here." Although entranced by Naruto and Shukaku's deadly dance, he had noticed that the fight was coming closer towards him and the girls. It was coming so close that a gust of wind, expelled far away by Shukaku, had enough power to violently rattle the tress in the surrounding area. Deep in the recess of his mind, Naruto watched as his counterpart began to push Shukaku towards Ino, Sakura and Tenten. In his distress, Naruto started banging his fist into the void before him, but nothing happened. A few more minutes of pointless ranting about evil bloodlines. A crack of light broke in the middle of the void. Naruto, not wasting this chance, took a step back before lashing out with a heel kick, causing the entire room and neighboring corridors to be engulfed in a blinding light. What the hell? Thought Naruto, wondering what had just happened, but couldn't ponder on the subject for long as a paw struck the tree he was on. Naruto jumped from one to another, avoiding a flurry of strikes from his opponent's tail. There is no way I'll be able to fight Shukaku at this rate, so the only thing left to do would be using the jutsu arrow Sennin taught me, though Naruto, ducking under something that flew his way. Gathering as much chakra as he could, Naruto shouted out, "Kuchiyose no Jutsu, summoning technique." Shukaku came to a halt as a dense cloud of smoke engulfed the area, momentarily blinding him till he exhaled, parting the smoke that obscured his line of vision. "Yo, how's it been, Toad boss?" Naruto asked, hopping onto the bulky figure hidden in the smoke. But he was surprised when, instead of the silky fabric that Gamabunta wore, he landed on soft fur that felt oddly familiar. "Brat, what the hell is happening?" roared Kyuubi, clearing the lingering smoke that revealed his shocked, red-slitted eyes. Naruto fell forward and landed on the Kyuubi's nose. He found himself staring into twin crimson eyes that were staring back at him. An eerie silence descended the forest till Naruto broke it. "How the hell are you out here?" shouted Naruto, pointing at his summon. "How the fuck am I supposed to know? I was walking through your mind, and the next thing I know I am here, with you on my nose," replied Kyuubi. Naruto sat down in a cross-legged position, resting his chin on his fist, as a calculative look entered his eyes. "Right, from what Arrow Sennin said, the summoning jutsu uses your chakra to create a pathway so a creature can cross over from their dimension to another." Kyuubi nodded its head. "And the size of the creature depends on the amount of chakra used to create the pathway, but to do that, you need to have made a pact with blood via a contract, so why did you get summoned instead of Gamabunta?" Kyuubi was about to shrug his shoulders until some information about a pact and contract settled in his mind. He gave a wary sigh and asked a question that he knew the answer to, but hoped he was wrong. Kit, did find any scroll about half your size while you explored your mind? Naruto was about to say no, but reconsidered his answer when he realized what Kyuubi was getting at. You mean the scroll I found was a? Kyuubi nodded. Oh, so does that mean that I can't summon toads anymore? Asked Naruto, disappointed at the chance of not being able to summon his dad's choice of summons. But he was relived when Kyuubi told him that it was possible to obtain and sign 2 contracts. Fuuten. Renkuden, wind release, drilling air bullet. The smoke in front of Naruto and Kyuubi parted, and then before both Jinchuriki and Demon knew, Kyuubi and Naruto were blown back by a heavy blast of air. You alive, Kit? Asked Kyuubi, rising and settling into a crouching position as his brother inhaled. Naruto didn't get a chance to reply when Kyuubi jumped into the air. The ground below them exploded into a shower of rubble and trees. Hold on, Kit, shouted Kyuubi above the roar of air. The destroyed fragments of trees beside Shukaku suddenly erupted into a blue flame that halted Shukaku's charge as his sand-based body converted to glass. What the hell was that? Naruto finally asked, grabbing a fistful of auburn fur as he perched himself atop Kyuubi's head. That was a fox technique called Kitsune Bai. Naruto opened his mouth to ask about its abilities but was interrupted by Kyuubi. As much as I like talking to you, Kit, we're gonna have to finish this fight soon because I am running out of chakra. And how are we meant to do that? Awaken the medium, huh? Was the only word Naruto could utter. Kyuubi gave a large sigh at his vessel's stupidity, as he dodged another wind attack, retaliating with his own fire attack. In simple words that you can understand, you're gonna have to wake Gaara up, and that would have been easy earlier on, but because Shukaku had been released for a certain period of time, he's already began to eat away at the boy's consciousness. So how the hell am I going to wake him up? Said Naruto, grimacing as a boulder scraped Kyuubi's side. You're gonna have to enter his mind and weaken Shukaku so Gaara can regain control. Okay, I get it, but how am I going to enter his mind? Only Yamanakas can do that, he said before sarcastically adding. Then you're gonna tell me that demons have a technique that lets them transfer their minds into another demon's mind to talk to them privately. And there is a technique like that, isn't there? Insert sigh here. Yes, there is, and I don't have the time to teach it to you, so I'll activate it and you'll do the rest, understand? Gotcha, said Naruto, drawing himself to his full height. His hands suddenly burst into sapphire flames, momentarily entrancing Naruto as they danced along his palms. Okay, brat, I'll try and latch on him. Then, I want you to place your hands on the vessel's head and that will transport you to his mind. Once you are there you'll be on your own, because I don't have enough chakra left to come along. Naruto had no chance to reply as Kyuubi sprung forward, his large frame casting a shadow over the destroyed forest. Trees being sliced to ribbons alerted Kyuubi of another vicious wind attack, so he began to spin in midair while activating Kitsune Bai, causing his entire body to be engulfed in azure flames, forming a flaming drill that plowed right into Shukaku. Now Kit. Naruto nodded and leapt onto Shukaku, running toward Gaara. But as his hand neared Gaara's head, sand encased his feet. Grunting, Naruto tried to escape but to no avail, the sand just tightened its grip on him. There is no way I am going to die here. A second later, the sand exploded and propelled Naruto forward, who used this chance to plant his fist into Gaara's face. A sharp pain shot from his palm to his brain as the darkness claimed him for the 3rd time. Good luck, kid, cuz you're needed, said Kyuubi before bursting into a cloud of smoke. All activity in the decimated forest ceased. Naruto ducked left, avoiding a stream of sand, and looked sideways for Gaara, who was assisting the blonde in his fight against Ichibi. But they couldn't get close to the sand demon, due to the sand as it tracked their every move, and for once, Naruto envied Sasuke for possessing the Sharingan. Come out wherever you are. Naruto snorted from his position behind a sand dune. As if I'm going to tell him where I am. The sand dune suddenly exploded into a spray of sand as a tan tail with blue runes slithered back into the air. Naruto turned round and met the vicious grin of Ichibi. Said creature drew in a great amount of air. He was about to use the drilling air bullet, but his snout was cut off by a spear that landed a few feet away from Naruto and Shukaku. The latter cried out, exhaling the air previously held in, but luckily, Gaara managed to pull Naruto out of the way. We need a plan, said Gaara as he and Naruto took cover from random sand whips. I know that, damn it, but I don't have one and I can't use this terrain to my advantage, replied Naruto, panting slightly. No, you can't but I can, said Gaara, pulling out the claw-shaped spear. I will try and tire him while you try and prepare your strongest technique. But that's only gonna deal a lot of damage. He will just heal back with the sand, interrupted Naruto. I was getting to that. We only need to weaken him till my influence in here is strong enough to force Shukaku to sleep. Naruto nodded and Gaara sprung into action, charging toward his prisoner. Closing his eyes, Naruto began to draw as much chakra as he could and the results were him glowing light blue and a spiral of chakra. Oi kid, let me take over, said the gruff voice of his counterpart. Yeah right, I am going to do this myself. I don't need your help. Oh yeah, what technique of yours is strong enough to practically destroy the freaky Tanuki in front of you? Naruto was about to give a smart reply but paused as he thought about what Otorin, A.N. I got tired of calling him Inner Naruto, said, and with a sigh, relented control. I knew you'd see things my way. Gaara slammed the side of the spear into Shukaku's cheek and with that hit, Shukaku skidded backwards. You fucking brat, I am so gonna kill you. Midway through his charge, Shukaku's head whipped sideways so fast if he had any bones his neck would have broke. The source of his attention was the glowing human writing several runes around himself. Shukaku recognized the runes as demonic runes and, on further inspection, noticed that they made up a destruction spell. With a shrill scream, the runes around Naruto glowed and made a link from them to Shukaku. In an instant, the raccoon exploded, leaving the disfigured form of Shukaku as he turned to dust. The entire area turned white. Now wake up. A crunch later, Naruto and Gaara flew through the air and their eyes locked. The thundering noise of a tremendous amount of sand dropping to the floor slightly deafened him as he finally caught sight of his teammate and Gaara atop a tree, both looking bloody and beaten up. Then, both flew and slugged each other with as much strength as they had left, and as they both plummeted, it would be that day Sasuke finally acknowledged Naruto as his equal in terms of power. Nearly all of Konoha stood in the graveyard, a gloomy atmosphere present. Naruto held Konohamaru beside him as both made their way to Sarutobi's black coffin. Droplets of rain fell upon their black clothing and, for a moment, Naruto looked up into the sky that began to part, revealing the fresh orange sky, yet still the rain continued to fall. Almost as if Mother Nature is crying for him, thought Naruto as he placed a flower onto the coffin. After leaving Konohamaru with his parents, Naruto started to walk to his favorite place in hope of cheering himself up, Ichiraku Ramen. Dobi, we're all going to Ichiraku, you coming? Said Sasuke. He frowned when Naruto walked past him, barely noting his presence as he continued down the road. Behind, Sakura was about to reprimand him for ignoring Sasuke, but a hand on her shoulder told her not to. Anko looked at Naruto with pity in her eyes. She could understand why he was acting like that. He had lost someone who he cared deeply for, just like she had. Resolve lightened up in her eyes. Both of them had felt great pain and although he was a brat, he had grown on her and she considered him to be her little brother of sorts. She walked beside Naruto and wrapped her arm around his shoulder, snapping him out of his daydream. Come on Gaki, free ramen on me. Naruto nodded and both continued to walk, the remaining teams trailing behind. What do you want Hitaki? Asked Naruto, his cold tone matching the chilling night air that traveled through Konoha. Kakashi gulped as he tried to find the right words. It had been 2 weeks after the death of Sarutobi Sasuke and although Naruto had got over it, part of him had changed. No longer was the carefree smile plastered on his face, nor were there the bright blue eyes his student had. Now, they were replaced by intense sapphire orbs. Kakashi took a deep breath to calm himself. He knew if he made a mistake, Naruto could kill him, seeing as the moon was already out and Naruto hated his guts. Are you going to waste my time or talk? Naruto's irritated voice woke him. It was time to face the music. Listen Naruto, I am sorry about what's happened between us. I understand if you hate me because I don't blame you. I laid down the rules of, those who abandon the rules are trash but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash, and I understand that I was being a hypocrite. I ignored you in favor of Sasuke because I recognized that he was the genius in the group and quickly branded you the failure, due to your grades. I not only failed you as a comrade and a sensei, but I also failed you as a friend. I am truly sorry and ask for your forgiveness." Naruto looked at his sensei below him before replying. "Get up, Kakashi." Kakashi complied and rose from the ground. "I accept your apology, but I don't forgive you. You abandoned me during the time I needed you most, and that I'll never forget, but, hopefully in time, you'll gain back my trust and forgiveness." With that said, Naruto disappeared into the midnight darkness, and soon Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves, both having not noticed the ruby-red iris amongst the tree shadows. "What the hell?" spluttered Naruto as he jumped out of his wet bed, brushing away wet strands of hair. He glared at the perverted Sannin, who was rolling on the floor with laughter. After Jiraiya had his fill of laughter and ate a breakfast prepared by Naruto, they headed over to the Hokage Tower. On the way there, they met the teams who were going for their own missions. "We'll get straight to the point, Jiraiya. We need a 5th Hokage and you are the only one in the village strong enough," said Koharu, looking Jiraiya in the eye. "I am sorry, but you got the wrong person for the job," replied the Gamma Sannin. "But we need one. Without a Hokage, Konoha will surely fall," protested Homura. Jiraiya was about to argue, but Naruto interrupted. "You know Ero Sennin. I heard that once a Hokage is chosen, they get the chance to lay down 3 laws, or something like that, and I figured you'd most probably make women wear nothing every Monday and Friday or something," finished Naruto, his eyes closed and arms crossed. He finally opened his eyes, and noticed the looks he was receiving. "What?" he asked. "Kid, apart from your brilliant idea for a rule, how the hell do you know about Hokage stuff? I mean, I've never seen you pick up a book." Naruto's face turned red and a tic developed on his forehead. "I got bored and decided to read a random book, but it turned out to contain information on being Hokage, and certain privileges, and me being curious, I read the entire 13-book collection. Though I did use Cage Bunchins to help. Either way, I am not the right person for the job, and before you pull your hair out, which I think you shouldn't 'cause there ain't any left, I have an idea for a perfect candidate." "Who is this person?" asked Homura, still glaring at Jiraiya for the hair comment. "Tsunade. Yes, she would be perfect for the job, but we have no idea where she might be." "Don't worry, I'll find her and I'll borrow one of your ninjas to come with me, so Naruto go pack and meet me at the East Gate in 10 minutes. "Naruto Baka? Why don't you take someone with talent like Uchiha Sasuke, Sasuke-kun?" protested the elders and Sakura. "I've made my decision, Naruto go pack." With that said, Jiraiya leapt out the window to his left. Naruto left in a more common suit. He walked out the door. A few hours later, they stopped at a town, which was currently celebrating a festival and also had a hill with a large clearing for training, hence why Naruto and Jiraiya were standing there. "Okay, Gaki. You've already learned the Rasengan and, usually, I'd have you master it, but because you're proficient with it, I am going to start your nature manipulation. First, we'll start with learning what your elements are, and I hope you remembered what I said." Naruto nodded. "Good. I want you to charge a bit of chakra into this piece of paper." Naruto did just that, and after the paper glowed, it split into 2 sections. One part was soaked and the other crumbled, and Jiraiya frowned slightly. "Wind, water, and earth. I was pretty sure the kid would have Minato's lightning elemental affinity." "Oh well. So, it looks like you have 3 elements, though wind is the strongest out of all of them." "That's so awesome. I got one more element that Sasuke Teme," exclaimed Naruto. Yeah, though I am surprised you've got 2 more elements right off the bat. It takes most seasoned Junins years to even develop another element." "Yeah, I'm just awesome like that," replied Naruto with a cheeky grin. Jiraiya shook his head and chuckled. "Right, it's about time we focused on our training. The Rasengan isn't a complete jutsu. Minato actually was going to use nature manipulation to make it more powerful, and the main element he was going to use was food. And so while we're looking for Tsunade, you're going to be teaching me nature manipulation?" "Yep, and, this way, you've got another high-powered jutsu you can add to your arsenal." "So are we gonna start now?" asked Naruto, excited at the prospect of finishing off a legendary technique created by a legendary ninja. "Nope. Now we're going to peek at the beautiful flowers this town has to offer," exclaimed Jiraiya with a guy-like smile and thumbs up which made Naruto shudder. Naruto panted lightly as he closed the door behind him before collapsing into the chair next to the open window. It had been a week since Jiraiya had begun to fully train the blonde in nature manipulation. Whereas, before, Naruto could only increase the strength or sharpness of the wind through the use of a medium, Jiraiya's goal was to train Naruto enough so he could manipulate the wind on his own. That and he would start to learn about Suiten Jutsu. Naruto continued to stare at the wide stream that ran west of Tanzanaku town. A knock snapped the Jinchuriki from his reverie. Opening the door, he was met with two vibrant ruby eyes that gazed into his sapphire orbs and, for a moment, his eyelids lowered before snapping up, showing glowing blue eyes. "Nice try," said Naruto, giving the Sharingan user and his blue-skinned partner a once-over. "Very good, Naruto-kun. Not many can shrug off the effects of a fully matured Sharingan's hypnotizing ability." The stranger replied as he smirked slightly at his former charge's growth while brushing coal-black hair away from his eye. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the gold ring adorning on the man's painted finger. "Well, a lot of things have changed since you left Weasel." "Fitting name, isn't it, Itachi?" said Naruto, a grin spreading across his face. "You knew it was me all the time. You continue to impress me, Naruto-kun," replied Itachi, surprise evident in his voice. Internally, he was partially troubled. If Naruto knew who he was when he served the Anbu, what else could the Yondaime's legacy know? "Anyway, you're here for the Kyuubi, right?" asked Naruto, all cheerfulness void from both his and Itachi's face. Itachi knew the pleasantries were over, but again, the question of what else Naruto knew came to his mind. This kid talks and knows too much. I think he'll cut off his legs," said a bored voice. Both Naruto and Itachi broke their staring contest and looked at the blue-skinned man picking his teeth. "Oh yeah, why don't you try fish face?" "With pleasure." Kisame grinned as his fingers moved for the large Zanbatu on his back. Before Kisame could grab Samahanda, an enraged shout of "Itachi" diverted the attention of all three ninja towards Sasuke, who stood at the end of the hallway with arcs of electricity danced around his hand. The two tomos in his Sharingan span wildly. "It's been a long time, Sasuke," said Itachi, now fully facing his younger sibling. "The Sharingan, and his is very similar to yours," commented Kisame, glancing at the young Uchiha. "My little brother." "Enough," roared Sasuke. A chirping sound was heard as the Chidori fully formed in his hand. "I hate you, detest you, and just to kill you, I've survived." Sasuke, thought Naruto. Without hesitation, Sasuke dashed forward. The Chidori in his palm carved a large jagged line into the wall. With the lightning blade crackling, Sasuke neared Itachi, the Chidori poised to pierce his heart. Time seemed to slow down as the Chidori got closer and closer and closer. "You're still a weakling." The wall of Naruto's room exploded. Debris flew everywhere as a cloud of dust and smoke engulfed the hallway, but that wasn't what had Naruto speechless. Looking through the smoke, Naruto could see Itachi holding Sasuke's wrist, a dying Chidori giving off its last sparks. Sasuke screamed out in pain as Itachi broke his wrist and then proceeded to knee him the gut, causing the young Uchiha to gasp as the air was driven out of him. "Why?" Itachi drove his elbow into Sasuke's back, forcing Sasuke into a kneeling position. "After all my training." Grabbing Sasuke's hair, Itachi flung him into the wall and followed up by another knee to Sasuke's stomach and a punch in the same place. Blood from Sasuke's mouth sprayed onto Itachi's coat. "There is still a large gap between Itachi and I. It seems the gap between you and I has hardly shrunk." "Pathetic," said Itachi, forcefully making his semi-conscious brother look him in the eye as his Sharingan morphed into the Mangekyo Sharingan. Before Itachi could react, Naruto appeared with his Zanbatu overhead in between Sasuke and Itachi. Luckily for Itachi, Kisame appeared and blocked Naruto's downward slash, clearing away most of the dust and smoke due to the power of the attack, which shocked Kisame because even his hands trembled underneath the bandaged body of Samahanda. With a burst of speed, Naruto disappeared and reappeared behind Itachi, thinning Kabikari into its Kusanagi form and stabbing it into Itachi's spine. Unfortunately, Itachi exploded in a cloud of smoke, making a scowl form on Naruto's face. Naruto watched as a smirking Kisame appeared beside his partner. Shit, 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 shit. No way I can fight both of them and protect Sasuke. I need to stall enough till Ero Sennin comes back or we're done for, thought thought Naruto as a bead of sweat trickled down his forehead at the prospect of fighting two S-ranked missing nen. So, what do we do, Itachi? Kill them or knock out them out? Kisame gave Naruto a shark-like grin. Depends. Will you come in peace or not, Naruto-kun? Asked Itachi as he reverted his eyes to his normal Sharingan. No way you're taking me without a fight, he replied, grabbing Zabuza's sword in both hands and placing it in front of him while parting his feet and crouching. Besides, Kyuubi doesn't want to leave either. The Jinchuriki dashed forwards at speeds well beyond his rank, his sword cutting into the side wall just like Sasuke's Chidori had previously done. Knock him out and bring him with us, said Itachi nonchalantly as he turned to walk away. Kisame nodded and made a ram sign as chakra began to build around him. The gills on his face parted as streaks of blue flowed from them and began to form water particles around him, growing in number and size. Suikoden. Suikoden no Jutsu. 1. Naruto's eyes widened as the water around Kisame surged forward, forming a large shark easily the size of the long hallway. The blonde closed his eyes, bracing for impact, and inhaling a lot of air, as his momentum carried him towards the aquatic predator. A large explosion ensued as the shark exploded, but, instead of Naruto gasping for air, he crashed into a large plate of armor, causing the genin to grab his nose in pain. Once the multicolored spots flew away from his vision, Naruto looked up and saw an orange toad about his size wearing dark armor standing defensively in front of him with its forearms stretched out. By the amount of water soaking it, he took a guess that it had protected him from the attack. Grasping the wall to help him stand, Naruto noticed plum-pink flesh starting to encase his hand. Looking around, Naruto watched as more of the flesh covered the walls of the hallway, burying Sasuke's body within it. Disgusted, Naruto wrenched his hand out of it, looking appalled as the flesh began to move once more, seemingly reaching out towards the two S-ranked criminals. Jiraiya the Toad Sage, said Itachi, looking at the new arrival who appeared beside Naruto with a knocked-out woman on his shoulders. I guess the girl didn't work, Itachi, said Kisame, beginning to perform his next water technique but was stopped by Itachi. Don't. We are not a match for Jiraiya at the moment, so the best course of action would be a tactical retreat, said Itachi, moving back. Tough luck trying to escape the great Mount Myoboku Toad's esophagus, announced Jiraiya proudly as the flesh began to move towards Kisame and Itachi, forcing both ninja to run into a second hallway. Both Jiraiya and Naruto ran after them and were shocked to find a hole surrounded by black fire rather than two cornered Akatsuki members. Leader Sama isn't going to be happy, commented Kisame, glancing at Itachi who was panting slightly from using Amaterasu and Tsukuyomi as they leapt from tree to tree. After sealing the black flames of Amaterasu, Naruto and Jiraiya returned back to where Sasuke's body was located. As Jiraiya bent to pick up the knocked-out Uchiha, they heard the sound of breaking glass and dynamic entry, making Naruto and Jiraiya turn their heads, and unfortunately, the foot of Maida Guy hit Jiraiya, sending the old pervert into the wall head first. A few minutes after Jiraiya woke up, he gave Guy the lowdown on what had happened, and with Sasuke on his back, Konoha's green beast was ready to set off back to Konoha, but not before giving Naruto a pair of spandex, which the blonde readily accepted. After all, anything to get stronger, right? That was the only thought running through Naruto's head as he held the spandex in his hand, feeling the soft fabric of the green cloth till the picture of him and Lee stood side by side in spandex came to mind. After Guy left, he handed the green monstrosity to Jiraiya with a simple sentence. Burn it. Normally, Jiraiya would berate Naruto for his lack of respect, but this time he would let it slide. Multiple rays of light lit up the azure water of the stream that continued from Tanzanaku all the way through the forest until it connected with a waterfall. Giant healthy trees swayed silently amongst the lush green of the forest. Dew left over from the rain of a few days ago sparkled brilliantly, forming a web of dazzling light that spread to the flowers of varied colors such as yellow and orange. The laughter of women spraying themselves with the lukewarm water of the waterfall blended in with the joyful songs of the birds perched on the numerous branches surrounded by the leaves that would fall soon in autumn. Overall, it was the most tranquil scene any person would see, if a slightly angry and irritated blonde genin hadn't occupied the area. Ero Sennin, I have a question for you, said Naruto, molding chakra once more before releasing it into the water below in an attempt to create a Mizu Bunshin, but, instead, all that arose was a disfigured blob of water. "What is it?" asked Jiraiya, resting his notepad beside him onto the soft green grass that covered most of the area. They had picked out the middle of a small forest which was a few minutes from Tanazanaku. It was filled with trees and a lot of ground. It made the perfect training spot. That and the fact that a waterfall could be found beside the clearing, and Jiraiya had heard from a few tourists that the waterfall was very popular with girls. With their first week in Tanazanaku nearly ending, and because neither of them had found or heard anything about Tsunade, Jiraiya was quickly becoming convinced that his former teammate had left. But Naruto's stubbornness kept the white-haired Sannin there. "How did Kisame do that technique when he had no water source close enough?" asked Naruto, his patience with the jutsu quickly running out as he failed to form even the clone's body properly for the 26th time. "Oh, that. Yes, I was surprised myself when he managed to do that. So far, only the second Hokage has been able to achieve that level of control of the water element," said Jiraiya, stroking his chin in thought. Naruto himself had lost his concentration when the second Hokage's name had been mentioned, so, naturally, he fell into the water, earning a snigger from Jiraiya. Naruto glared at him as he rose from the water and joined his sensei on the ground, taking off his wet jumpsuit and leaving him in his orange boxers. "As I was saying, the second Hokage was the only person known to summon water from thin air due to his affinity for Suidan Jutsu. It is possible to do. Seeing as Kisame was able to do this, however, it takes a lot chakra control, and with Kisame's chakra, it should be impossibly hard because he would need something to thin out his chakra once he expelled it," said Jiraiya as his mind began to work on how he could do it. Having hardly understood Jiraiya's last few words, the only word Naruto could say was, "What? We haven't got this far in your training, so I haven't explained it to you yet, but I might as well." "Okay. This is the last time I'll say this, so make sure you listen," said Jiraiya, clearing his throat for the explanation. The Nandame Hokage was famed for not only his legendary blade but his unnatural talent for Suidan Jutsu. The second Hokage was able to summon large amounts of water from nothing but thin air. A lot of people have tried to replicate what he could do, but, until now, they all failed miserably. From what I could gather, the second had to first expel chakra into the air. Then, he had to thin all the chakra into different layers that were so thin they were nearly invisible. Next, he would have to push each of the layers of chakra against each other until they managed to squeeze out the moisture in the air. Then, he would begin to push out more chakra into the layers, mixing the moisture with chakra until he had water droplets. Finished Jiraiya. Naruto sat in silence as his brain processed the explanation. All of it sounded really complicated to him, but he understood the basics of it. "So it's kind of like squeezing out water from a damp cloth?" asked Naruto, staring at the crystal blue water. "You could say that," replied Jiraiya. "Although, with Kisame's chakra capacity, he would need something that would thin out the chakra as he expelled it." "Did you see anything weird on him that could have helped?" asked Jiraiya, glancing at his godson whose eyebrows were furrowed in concentration on his face. Then they straightened out as he clicked his fingers together. "I remember the gills on his face glowing blue as short streams of chakra floated around him." "Maybe they helped," said Naruto, awaiting Jiraiya's answer. "Maybe, after all, Kisame can't be called normal, so maybe he used them somehow to do it." "Either way, you have training you need to get back to and I have my research," announced Jiraiya, picking up his notepad once more. "You know, you could help me once in a while," grumbled Naruto as he walked over to the stream. "It's so easy, Gaki," exclaimed the Toad Sannin, turning again to face Naruto. "Well, if it's so easy, why don't you explain to me how to do it?" snapped Naruto as he glared holes at Jiraiya. "When you make your cage bushins, you manipulate the chakra to form the body, right?" Naruto nodded his head. "Well, this is different. When creating a Mizu Bunshin, you don't try and manipulate the chakra. You use the chakra to manipulate the water. You're doing the same thing you would do with a cage bunshin. That is the main thing you'll have to remember when you learn to use both Suidan and Futon Jutsu. One is weightless and the other isn't." Naruto took it all in and, being careful to do what Jiraiya said, he tried it again. The result was the water forming an aquatic body instead of blobs of water. Excited that he was now able to form the body, Naruto spent the rest of the afternoon experimenting with different ways of how to form the Mizu Bunshin perfectly. You did well today, Gaki, so as a treat we'll be eating out and I'm paying, called Jiraiya as he exited the bathroom after having a quick shower. Entering the bedroom, he found Naruto engrossed in a scroll explaining the basics of Fuinjutsu, earning a raised eyebrow from the white-haired Sannin. Fuinjutsu? Asked Jiraiya, sitting onto the second of the two beds that occupied the cream-colored bedroom. It's nothing, I just got bored, said Naruto quickly, stuffing the scroll into his rucksack. Alright, let's go cuz I'm starving, said Naruto. Jiraiya followed him out but not before glancing at the rucksack. Why would Naruto be interested in Fuinjutsu? Thought Jiraiya as they walked out of the hotel. Naruto and Jiraiya soon entered a small bar located in the southwest of Tanazanaku that served dango and other types of dishes. As he walked through the door with Naruto a few meters behind him, Jiraiya's eyes scanned the entire place before spotting a busty blonde who sat opposite a black-haired woman holding a plump pink pig. Tsunade, said Jiraiya automatically, staring at the woman who turned toward the person who called and found herself surprised at seeing her old teammate. Jiraiya, what are you doing here? She asked, wondering why after several years, he suddenly turned up. Just like Orochimaru, finally, we've been looking all over for you and we find you in a bar. Figures. Naruto soon walked forward and found Jiraiya talking two beautiful women. One of them having large breasts that Naruto couldn't help but stare at for a few seconds before snapping back to reality. Ero Sennin, we're meant to be looking for the old hag, not talking to two girls you want to do research with, said Naruto, irritated that Jiraiya could get so easily distracted. Naruto, this is Tsunade and her apprentice Shizune, said Jiraiya, motioning for Naruto to join them at the table. She's Tsunade. I thought she was an old hag, he said, sitting beside Shizune but not before wondering who would have a pig as a pet. Jiraiya and Shizune stifled their laughs when Naruto addressed Tsunade as old. Tsunade herself developed a tick mark on her forehead but calmed herself down. Anyway, why are you here? Asked Tsunade, naturally curious as to why both her teammates suddenly turned up looking for her. Have you heard about the attack on Konoha? Asked Jiraiya, sneaking a quick glance towards Naruto in worry. Last time he mentioned the attack on Konoha, Naruto had slipped into depression, doing everything he was told with no emotion whatsoever. Like a zombie. Yes, what of it? She asked, pouring more sake for herself. Did you know that Sensei died? No, she replied, wondering where this conversation was going. And did you know that he died by Orochimaru's hand? This time shock was in her eyes. Orochimaru actually killed Sensei, so that's where he got his hand sealed. What do you want exactly, Jiraiya? Asked Tsunade, getting impatient. I am asking you to return to Konoha and be our fifth Hokage, Jiraiya said, looking at Tsunade to show how serious he was being. Tsunade herself was surprised but that surprise vanished quickly. No way, I am not taking the job of Hokage, she said, old unwanted memories stirring. What? Why? Jiraiya asked, shocked at why she would turn it down. Then it hit him. That job is cursed, Jiraiya. I already lost my precious people due to the dream of being Hokage, she replied, her voice filled with hate as she took a large swig of her sake. Besides, only a fool would be Hokage. To throw your life away needlessly. She finished, reaching for her bottle of sake but it toppled over as Naruto slammed his hand on the table, the bottle spilling its contents everywhere. What the hell, kid? Asked Tsunade, averting her eyes from the spilt sake to Naruto, and when she saw the look in his eyes, she flinched. I don't care if you call your lover and brother fools, but don't ever call Sarutobi Gigi and my father fools. He roared, the table splitting in half under the pressure of his palm. The surprise was quickly forgotten as Tsunade too stood up, her brown eyes blazing. Naruto shouldn't have said that and neither should have Tsunade. This isn't going to be good, thought Jiraiya with a sweat drop as he heard the two continue their banter. Enough. Outside, said Tsunade, already heading for the door that flew from its hinges when Tsunade pulled on the knob. Naruto followed her, his eyes burning a fierce blue in anger. This'll be good, thought Jiraiya, arms folded across his shirt as he leaned against the wooden wall of the tavern, and he wasn't the only one watching. Others from surrounding shops peeked their heads out to see what the commotion was all about. Hey brat, I bet I can beat you with one finger, she taunted, looking Naruto in the eye and shivering slightly at the anger and aggression focused at her. Go ahead and try, he sneered, lowering into a crouch. The wind blew, lifting a few leaves and some gravel across the large dirt road. A growl rumbled in Naruto's throat as he leapt forward far faster than Tsunade expected him to. But he is the fourth son and Jiraiya's apprentice, she thought, preparing for Naruto's attack. As he closed in, Naruto saw her strike the ground with her finger, creating a fissure that caused him to lose his balance, but that was all Tsunade needed. Appearing before him, she pushed him straight through a vegetable stand and into a clothes shop. Naruto groaned as he lifted himself off the ground, shaking his head to clear away the dizzy spots covering his vision. Then suddenly, an inhuman snarl ripped from his chest as he willed himself to shift. He could feel the familiar power begin to course through his veins. Ever since the Chunin exam, when he had given his counterpart control over his body, he hadn't trusted himself to transform due to the risk of losing control, but with his anger growing and the moonlight drawing out his lupine side, this time, he let the warmth of the transformation continue. Only this time he was in control. The onlookers had a look of terror on their faces as a loud howl pierced the silence of the night. Even Tsunade shivered at the sound and was especially frightened when a large wolf slowly walked out of the large wall in the shop. It was easily the size of a horse, if not bigger. When it rose to its hind legs, it looked massive. The wind shifted its auburn fur, and once it fully turned round, blue, livid eyes bore into her, as if searching the fear inside her. It lifted its head and sniffed the air, a wolfish grin revealing a row of sharp teeth widened across its face. Naruto could smell the fear coming from her, wafting into his nostrils as he lowered his head into a wolfish grin meant to intimidate her. Instead, a frown crossed her face, as she got ready, one hand behind her back and the other on the ground. With a growl, he leapt at her and, this time, he was twice as fast. Even before Tsunade could create another fissure, Naruto pinned her to the ground. She stifled a scream as Naruto's claws easily torn through the skin of her shoulders and hooked into the ground. And, attempting to phase her, he opened his mouth, but they were snapped shut by a headbutt from Tsunade, causing him to recoil backwards, and since Tsunade was free, she slugged him in the face and an audible crunch came from Naruto as he sailed through the air. Midair, he twisted his body and landed onto the ground in time to roll sideways, dodging the chakra-infused punch coming his way. As he came to a stop, his eyes widened at the large crater twice his size around Tsunade. Fuck me, he thought, eyeing her with more interest. He had thought that due to the fact that she drank a lot of sake, her reactions, chakra control, and etc. would have dropped significantly, but since he was proven wrong, he was taking it to another level. Closing his eyes, he began to concentrate, red chakra forming a ring around him. The red chakra then began to grow, bathing the street in red light. Others, Jiraiya included, looked in wonder as the chakra built up, then slammed into Naruto, whose eyes snapped open. The second tail on his behind started to glow a bright red, and at the same time, a small flame the size of a flower danced on the tip of the tail. Inside him, Naruto could feel the heat growing, expanding everywhere. His heart beating so fast he could count the beats in his head. As the fire finally formed, it started its journey from the pit of his stomach to his mouth, where it exited in a torrent of orange and red fire towards Tsunade. Naruto winced as the heat from the flames burnt his throat slightly as it continued to speed towards Tsunade, who, as a last-ditch effort, struck the ground with her right fist, causing the ground before her to rise up, therefore acting as an improvised shield against the fire, which itself had reached Tsunade and, luckily for her, had been split into two as it hit the shield of earth. After a minute or so, Tsunade deemed it safe to look up, and lowering the shield, which had turned a black burnt color, her gaze reached Naruto, who had dropped to the ground in exhaustion from using it to Kankei that had completely taxed his reserves. Amongst the front of the crowd, Jiraiya whistled in appreciation at the damage Naruto had caused as he looked at the burnt mass of wood behind Tsunade, who in turn, also looked, and her eyes widened at the thought of what would have happened if that had been her. "Tsunade-sama, are you okay?" said Shizune, trotting over to her master. Her eyes filled with worry, but Tsunade waved her off with a, "I'm fine. It's the brat you should be tending to." And with that, Shizune gave an embarrassed smile before setting down Tun-Tun beside Tsunade and then going to Naruto to make sure he was fine. Tsunade gave a sigh and Tun-Tun gave a short snort, Tsunade stroking her back as a reply as she rose from the ground and turning, walked towards her fellow Sanin who was enjoying the heat of the mini forest fire his student had created. Sensei's first lesson: never underestimate any opponent. You're lucky that's the first time he's ever done that. Otherwise you'd be in a hospital with third-degree burns. Chastised Jiraiya. A smile tugging at his face as Tsunade's face settled into a familiar scowl. I thought I had it in the bag, but when he turned into that thing, I knew that I wasn't gonna win. Jiraiya, she said, a contemplative look on her face. Who exactly is he? And with that said, Jiraiya spent the rest of his night explaining to Suede that boy that was Naruto Namikaze. Arrows Sennin, when are you going to start teaching me earth manipulation? Asked Naruto as he sat on the bed, looking expectantly at Jiraiya. Not yet, Gaki. You still have to learn how to control wind before we move on to earth, Jiraiya replied, flicking onto the next page of the book he was reading. Naruto grunted in frustration as he rolled off his bed onto the floor. Placing his hands onto the floor, he then lifted the rest of his body upwards until he was into the handstand posture. What are you doing? Asked Jiraiya, eyebrow raised as he pried his eyes from book. Bored, so I'm doing some push-ups, was a quick reply. If you're doing that, then we might as well start the wind training, said Jiraiya, once again returning back to his book. Huh? Was Naruto's intelligent question, causing the hermit to chuckle a bit before he settled his book down beside him. I was going to teach this after you had a better understanding of wind, but seeing as you're already in the position, we might as well get started, he said, looking at Naruto to see if he had any questions, but his godson just sent him a look saying, carry on. Okay. The best way to explain this training would be to first explain to you what suction is in turn. I'll explain the vacuum phenomenon. Now listen up. You may not understand at first, but when I'm done, you should get the gist of it, okay? Asked Jiraiya, a serious look on his face for once. Naruto nodded in understanding. Okay, we'll start with vacuums. Suppose two flat objects are placed against each other. The air between the two objects is removed and thus, the objects cannot be separated. Due to the surrounding atmosphere, pressure is exerted onto the objects, therefore preventing their separation. To a lesser extent, suction occurs whenever a palm is pressed against a surface. You following so far? Quote. Naruto nodded, still in the handstand position. Good. Now, we take your position right now. Your palms are placed against the floor, so therefore, the air between your hands and the floor is removed. We'll call that one surface. Also, the space extending from the backs of your hands to the limit of the atmosphere is the second. The fruits of this special training is that you should be able to manipulate the wind's surface. This will be accomplished easily by basically slipping your hand in between the two surfaces that form the wind. So soon, you should be able to do this, said Jiraiya as he pushed his hands forward, no sooner than a second later exerting a light gust of wind that knocked Naruto over onto the floor. And how will I learn to do that? Asked Naruto, picking himself off the floor. The way to do that is by learning to stick to the floor, replied the toad sage. And how will I do that? Asked the blonde once more, slowly getting annoyed at his mentor who laughed a little. I want you to get back in the handstand posture, he said, Naruto complying as he got up once more. Now, try and get your body into a horizontal position, he said. Naruto nodded and slowly brought his legs down first, followed by his torso until his body was horizontal. And now, move towards me without letting your feet touch the ground. Naruto moved his left hand first, but as he proceeded to move his right hand, he fell onto the floor with a cry of surprise, causing Jiraiya to roar with laughter at his student. Naruto shot Jiraiya an evil look as his face slowly turned pink with embarrassment. It's okay, Gaki, finally said Jiraiya with a lofty sigh. Even I did that the first time. So now you have your training. I want you to acknowledge that division. Acknowledge it and control it. Quote, you can bet your hermit ass on it, replied Naruto with a confident smile on his face, causing Jiraiya to smile too. And here begins your path to greatness. 5 days later. Jiraiya-sama, shouted Shizune as she entered Naruto and Jiraiya's room with a resounding bang due to the forced entry. What tea? Replied Jiraiya, his voice seemingly floaty as he sat up quickly before groaning and holding his head in his hands. It's Tsunade-sama, she's gone to face Orochimaru alone, shouted Shizune, worry evident in her voice, and the same worry was conveyed on Jiraiya's face as realization hit him. That's why she asked me to go drinking with her. She must have messed up my chakra so I wouldn't interfere with their battle. Shit, cursed Jiraiya as he rolled himself out of bed, hitting Naruto awake, causing the young ninja to cry out in shock. What the hell, Arrow Sennin? Said Naruto, rubbing the sleepiness out of his eyes. Get ready quickly, kid, we have to help Tsunade quickly, he said, sticking the summoning scroll onto his back. What's the old hag? I'll tell you on the way. Just get dressed, and with that said, Shizune and Jiraiya left, leaving Naruto to dress, and after a few minutes, he caught up to them. Was anyone with Orochimaru? Asked Jiraiya. Noticing the flash of understanding in Naruto's eyes as he realized the situation, his mouth turning into a fine line of anger and contempt. Yes, he was wearing glasses and had silver hair. That's all I saw, replied Shizune. His name is Kabuto. He's a medic nin. Be careful when fighting him because he can use chakra scalpels, warned Naruto as he increased his speed, leaping past both Shizune and Jiraiya, who also increased their speed in turn. Soon, they all arrived at the battle scene. Tsunade jumped backwards as several snakes launched themselves upwards from underneath the grass-covered ground, all of them hissing in union. Tsunade then had to move sideways as chakra scalpels came slashing down, leaving a thin green trail in their wake. A knee flashed forward and Tsunade pushed it away before retaliating, her green-covered fist a hair's breadth away from Kabuto's head. Orochimaru then appeared to her left, foot hurtling towards her face, but Jiraiya appeared and pushed it down with his palm, creating an opening which he gladly took. A fist later, Orochimaru was sent flying backwards. Tsunade, you and I will handle Orochimaru. Leave the side kick to Naruto and Shizune, said Jiraiya, chasing after Orochimaru before she could reply. Kabuto tried to strike at her with his foot, but Naruto caught it and with a small spin, threw him away. Go, we can handle him, Naruto reassured her. Tsunade nodded and chased after the other two Sennin. You ready, Shizune? Asked Naruto, unclipping Kabuikiri from his back and holding him in front of him. Hi, was her reply before she threw forward several needles, each gleaming in the afternoon sun. Kabuto leapt upwards and escaped but was forced to block the meat cleaver as it bared down onto him, propelling him back down to earth, landing nimbly onto his feet in a crouched position. Bleeding lips turned upwards in contempt as Onyx eyes analyzed the two people before them, plotting the best way to defeat the opponents. With a battle strategy in mind, Kabuto sprang into action. Speeding forward, he met Naruto's blade with his kunai head-on, shifting his weight to his right, causing the blade to slide down the kunai, therefore creating an opening on Naruto's stance. His chakra-coated fist was only inches away from Naruto's abdomen before he had to leap away in order to escape the volley of poison-coated needles. Thanks, Shizune-chan. Guess that was the wake-up call I needed to get serious, said Naruto, violent dark blue chakra beginning to swirl around him, forming an orb of translucent energy. Shizune was forced to gasp in surprise as Naruto's hair suddenly began to grow longer, as did his canines. The hands holding Kabuikiri's handle grew slightly bigger, nails elongating. Shoulders grew broader while arms and legs bulged slightly. Naruto? Asked Shizune, although it came out as a whisper, but Naruto's point-tipped ears heard the question, and before he could answer, their opponent was already attacked once again, a fireball sizzling through the air, seemingly brighter underneath the sun's solar glare. Naruto pushed Shizune to the side as she was too late to react. Instead of being burnt, he cut through the flames with his sword, shocking Kabuto. Naruto grinned a deadly smile in response and retaliated, Kabuikiri already carving its way through the air and onto Kabuto. The med nin stepped to the side with a light smirk on his face. Futile, he uttered, but then eyes widened in shock as Naruto's body twisted, dislodging the sword and few chunks of earth, before slicing at him. Barely blocking the attack with his kunai, Kabuto felt a stinging and numb sensation run through him as he fell onto the floor. Both Shizune and Naruto allowed a brief flicker of relief to flash across their faces, but then that turned to disbelief as the Kabuto at Naruto's feet exploded into smoke. A shudder ran through the ground, then an explosion. Naruto spun round and saw Kabuto strike Shizune onto the ground, knocking her out cold. The lycanthrope gave a primal roar laced with chakra, pushing Kabuto back, giving Naruto enough time to appear beside him, sword swung in an arc. Four eyes ducked beneath the blade and performed an uppercut, connecting beautifully with Naruto's jaw and launching him a few centimeters in the air. Kabuto smirked as he then grabbed onto Naruto's jacket and using Naruto's momentum, performed a judo throw. The blonde crashed into the ground with a loud thud, kicking up a small amount of dust and smoke. Kabuto snarled and backflipped, avoiding a downward slash as Naruto appeared before disappearing once more. He avoided my second attack with a cage bushin. He's improved, thought Kabuto, now realizing that Naruto could not be taken lightly anymore. He was about to launch a counterattack but then he heard his master call him. He vanished in a burst in speed and Naruto followed, appeared beside Jiraiya and Tsunade, Jiraiya looking somewhat sick. "You okay, Ero Sennin?" asked Naruto, looking at his mentor in concern. "I'll be okay, kid," replied Jiraiya, staring at his former teammate. Tsunade noticed that Shizune was not with Naruto and was about to ask but then, there was a loud rumble, then an explosion of smoke. Orochimaru's maniacal cackle echoed as he burst through the smoke, stood on creature that Naruto thought was roughly the same size as Gamabunta. "Orochimaru. You owe me 30 sacrifices SSSU whelp," said a hissing voice from within the smoke. "Is that Manda?" asked Tsunade, eyes wide in surprise. "How did Orochimaru summon him?" Quote, "He had a summoning tattoo on his arm. That kid, Kabuto, activated it," replied Jiraiya, who then looked at Naruto as he noticed the change. "He forced you to get that serious?" asked Jiraiya, slight tension underlaying in his voice. Naruto nodded in response, eyes still fixed on the large column of smoke, not noticing the troubled look appear on Jiraiya's face. Then the column of smoke moved. "Move!" roared Jiraiya as he leapt away to the side, Naruto and Tsunade jumping away to safety as a purple reptilian head crashed into the ground. The reptile roared as it raised its head, purple scales reflecting light. "What is that?" whispered Naruto in fear. "That's Manda," replied Tsunade, already biting her thumb to draw blood, king of the snakes. She then rapidly ran through the summoning jutsu hand signs before slamming her hand into the ground, numerous kanji spreading out in a circle around her hand. Jiraiya mimicked the same action, kanji spreading out on the ground. Both then shouted, "Kachiyose no jutsu." The earth beneath them rumbled as more smoke engulfed the clearing. A great wind coincidentally blew past, dispelling the smoke and revealed the other two boss summons. Katsu and Gamabunta. The great, purple python hissed in content as it eyed its two rivals. "Orochimaru," it spoke, a small amount of glee in its voice. "For this summon, I do not require any sacrifices," said Manga before lurching forward at great speeds. "Troublesome," said Gamabunta before leaping upwards, avoiding the lunge. Katsuya, the slug boss summon, spat out a green sea of acid towards Manga. The snake slithered underground, disappearing from view but then a moment later, resurfaced, a bladed tail swing forth like a whip. Katsuya told her master to hold on as she suddenly split into numerous white slugs. Manda hissed in content but then a moment later, roared as several large goblets of water impacted against his back. Swinging his great head round, he saw Gamabunta hurtling to the ground, dagger poised for impalement. Manda moved backwards, avoiding the slash and as soon as the boss toad landed, the python's body coiled around Gamabunta before beginning to constrict him. Manda cackled with joy as his reptilian body continued to make subtle movements, causing pain to the amphibian in his grasp. Jiraiya fired a large fireball as the snake, scoring a direct hit. The grip on Gamabunta loosened enough for the toad to leap upwards, taking the snake up with him. Bunta made a fist and as he was about to deliver but, Manda's horned head bashed against his chest, sending both summons several meters apart but the toad wasn't done. As both gargantuan creatures fell back to earth, Gamabunta vomited ounces of oil onto the snake summon. Jiraiya immediately caught on and quickly performed Kaden. Enden, igniting the oil which coated Manda therefore creating Kaden. Gamayu Enden. Meanwhile, Naruto had began his second confrontation with Kabuto, both clashing against each other, the only difference being experience. Naruto attacked once more, this time activating the slimming seals on Kabuikiri Hancho, slimming it down into the size of a Chikudo. Naruto grinned at Kabuto's surprise and attacked, this time both seemingly even matched. Jutsus, gashes, slices, punches and kicks were exchanged as they both danced the deadly dance of combat. In a surprise move using the substitution jutsu, Kabuto was able to use his chakra scalpels in order to wound Naruto, severing the tendons in Naruto's leg as he fell down to the ground in agony. Just as Kabuto was about to strike the deciding blow, Tsunade appeared, punch striking Kabuto in the stomach, sending him backwards a few feet. As Tsunade rose into a fighting stance, Kabuto stood up and laughed before slashing his arm, blood slowly dripping down onto the ground. His smile grew bigger as he saw Tsunade's face turn pale at the sight of blood. Hand-coated in chakra, he attacked, aiming for her head, but instead of impacting against flesh, a large ringing sound was made as the metal knuckles of his gloves clashed with Naruto's headband. Naruto elbowed the snake apprentice, creating enough distance between the two for Naruto to make a Rasengan. Unknown to him, as he began to create the spinning orb, he unintentionally began to create it in between two wind surfaces. Therefore, the spinning ball of chakra turned into a deadly ball of wind. He attacked and Kabuto attacked too, chakra scalpel already ready. Both ninjas clashed, Naruto's Rasengan burrowing into Kabuto's abdomen while Kabuto's scalpel pierced several veins near Naruto's heart. The clash seemed to shake Tsunade out of her fear-induced stupor. "Tsunade-sama!" shouted Shizune as she ran towards them. "Kabuto!" roared Orochimaru, realizing they were fighting a losing battle. "We leave," he ordered. Both Snake Sanin and apprentice disappeared via Shushin. Together, all summons were dispelled, Jiraiya breathing a great sigh of relief before limping to the group. He looked on as Tsunade tried to heal Naruto with a look of great concern on her face, making Jiraiya smile. "Only you, Naruto. Only you," thought the hermit as he looked up at the bright sun sitting pretty in the blue sky. "Everybody packed and ready?" asked Jiraiya as he, Naruto, Shizune, Tsunade and Tun stood near the town entrance. Somehow, Naruto had shown Tsunade the light, and in the end, she decided to return to Konoha as Hokage. In appreciation, Tsunade gave Naruto her necklace, which was proudly dangling from his neck. Everyone nodded in response. "Well then, off to Konoha," he proclaimed as they all set off towards the village hidden within the leaves. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.